Marshal William Seward to review it. Seward exercises due diligence by presenting Lincoln with a 6-page analysis of the speech. Damn, he had 6 pages of saying why this is wrong,
Right.
in which he offers some 49 suggested changes, of which the president changed 27 of those 49. So,
Very good thing that
hey,
happened.
man, we don't want to come across as Lincoln was probably ripping into some shit. I'm not going to tolerate this shit. And Seward's like, whoa, dude. I mean, come on, we gotta, let's not sow some division here. Huh?
That's not what you want. Lincoln's first presidential inauguration, March 4th, 1861, on the east portico of the United States Capitol. Portico. Prior to taking the oath, Lincoln delivered his inaugural address. He opened by attempting to reassure the South that he had no intention or constitutional authority to interfere with slavery in states where it already existed. He promised to enforce the fugitive slave law and spoke favorably about a pending constitutional amendment that would preserve slavery in the states where it currently existed. I mean, look at this guy. Everything I said about him is true.
I don't think anybody ever questioned that.
He also assured that states that had already succeeded that the federal government would not assail them or attack them violently.
After these assurances, however, Lincoln declared, here we go, that secession was the essence of anarchy, and it was his duty to hold, occupy, and possess the property belonging to the government.
Right.
Well, yeah, you can't just let them take forts. Focusing on those within the South who were still on the fence regarding secession, Lincoln contrasted persons in one section or another who seek to destroy the Union as it exists versus those, however, who really love the Union.
Right.
In his closing remarks, Lincoln spoke directly to the secessionists and asserted that no state could secede from the Union upon its own mere motion, and emphasized the moral commitment that he was undertaking to, quote-unquote, preserve, protect, and defend the laws of the land.
He then concluded the address with a firm but conciliatory message. He says, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone, all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature."
Well, Lincoln then began the process of constructing his cabinet on election night. Wow, carpenter.
Right.
In an effort to create a cabinet that would reunite the Republican Party, Lincoln attempted to reach out to every faction of his party, with a special emphasis on balancing former Whigs with former Democrats.
Right.
Lincoln's eventual cabinet would include all of his main rivals for the Republican nomination, yes. He did not shy away from surrounding himself with strong-minded men, even those whose credentials for office appeared to be much more impressive than his own.
Right.
Though the cabinet appointees held different views on the economic issues, all opposed the extension of slavery into territories.
There you go. The first cabinet position filled, Secretary of State. It was tradition for the president-elect to offer this, the most senior cabinet post, to the leading person of his political party. It was best known and most popular.
Right.
William Seward was that man, and in mid-December 1860, Vice President-elect Hamlin, acting on Lincoln's behalf, offered the position to him. Seward had been deeply disappointed by his failure to win the 1860 Republican presidential nomination, so he was like, "I'll agree. I will serve as Abe's Secretary of State."
I mean, why would you not?
Right. He's
He's probably figuring, dude, we're at a turbulent time in history. There's no reason to think that Lincoln and Hamlin wouldn't be like taken out.
Right. So he was second in line, third in line.
Well, by the end of 1862, Seward had emerged as the dominant figure in Lincoln's cabinet, though the Secretary of State's conservative policies on abolition and other issues alienated many within the Republican Party. Despite pressure from some congressional leaders to fire Seward, Lincoln retained his Secretary of State for the duration of his presidency.
All right.
Lincoln's choice for Secretary of the Treasury was Ohio Senator Salmon Chase. If you remember, he ran against Lincoln as well, and he was also Seward's chief political rival.
Fantastic. Chase, he was the leader of the more radical faction of the Republicans that sought to abolish slavery as quickly as possible. Seward, among others, they opposed the selection of Chase because of both his strong anti-slavery record and his opposition to any type of settlement with the South that could be considered an appeasement of slaveholders. He's like, no, I don't want anything to do with the issue of slavery. Everything's illegal.
It needs to be gone now.
Right. Chase, he sought the 1864 Republican nomination, and he frequently worked to undermine Lincoln's reelection. But Lincoln nonetheless retained Chase due to Chase's competence as a Secretary of the Treasury and popularity among radical Republicans.
Well, Chase sounds like a piece of shit, huh?
Right.
Well, Chase instead offered his resignation in June of 1864 due to a dispute over an appointment And Lincoln, having just been renominated for president, accepted Chase's resignation.
Yeah, he's pissed.
And Lincoln then replaced Chase with William Fessenden, a radical Republican who had served as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Agent Fessenden resigned in February of 1865, and he was ultimately replaced with Hugh McCulloch, who had served as the comptroller of the currency. All right, made up.
All right. The most problematic cabinet selection made by Lincoln was that of Simon Cameron as the Secretary of War. Cameron, he was one of the most influential public leaders in the crucial political state of Pennsylvania. But he was also alleged to be one of the most corrupt as well, usually how it goes. He was opposed within his own state by the faction led by Governor-elect Andrew Curtin and party chairman A.K. McClure.
Hey, Troy McClure here.
You might know me from such elections as
1856.
Nonetheless, by Inauguration Day, the competing factions realized that it was important to business interests that at least some of Pennsylvania be in Lincoln's cabinet. And Cameron was made Secretary of War.
What is this? The MLB All-Star or a representative from each team, a.k.a. state, has to be in the freaking game?
Should be. It's a good idea, though. You want everybody involved, think they have a voice.
Keyword think. Now, some historians believe that the final selection of Cameron for this soon-to-be critical position was a clear indicator that Lincoln did not anticipate a civil war. Feeling that Cameron was not capable of handling the War Department, Lincoln tactfully removed Cameron in January 1862 and appointed him the ambassador to Russia.
Oh, that's even worse. Well, I guess Russia was.
And like everybody would probably
they were in a war at that time too, weren't they?
1862, yeah.
Russia? Yeah, that's crazy.
Revolution's coming up for them. Cameron, he was replaced by Edwin Stanton, who was staunchly unionist, pro-business conservative. He was a Democrat who moved toward the radical Republican faction.
Right.
Stanton worked more often and more closely with Lincoln than any other senior official. Yeah, they were like buds.
Yeah, good for them, though.
I mean, he kind of had to be.
Right. Lincoln then appointed two individuals from the border states to his cabinet. Montgomery Blair, Maryland, who was popular among anti-slavery and border state Democrats, became Lincoln's first postmaster general. Blair came from a prominent political family, as his father, Francis Preston Blair, had served as an advisor to President Andrew Jackson. While Blair's younger brother, Francis Preston Blair Jr., he was a major unionist leader in Missouri.
Blair's Postal Service aptly responded to the challenges posed by the Civil War, but the Blair family alienated key northern and border state leaders during the war. Seeing Blair as a political liability, Lincoln dismissed him from the cabinet in September of 1864.
I mean, what are you going to do?
And replaced him with William Dennison. Missouri provided the other border state cabinet member in the form of Attorney General Edward Bates. He resigned in 1864 and was replaced by James Speed, who was the older brother of Lincoln's close friend Joshua Speed.
See, man, this isn't just like a new thing. Shit has been, people resign like every year.
Honestly,
it's crazy. You're gonna have
Sometimes you don't get what you signed up for, so you're like, I gotta go.
Like, yeah, this ain't right. Lincoln, he tasked Vice President-elect Hamlin with finding someone from a New England state for the cabinet. Hamlin recommended Gideon Wells of Connecticut. He was a former Democrat who had served in the Navy Department under President James K. Polk. Other influential Republicans concurred, and Wells became Secretary of the Navy. Good for that guy. For the position of Interior Secretary, Lincoln, he said, "Hey, Caleb Blood Smith." Hey, Blood. What up, Blood? What up, Blood? Hey, Caleb Smith of Indiana. He's a former Whig representing the same type of Midwestern constituency as Lincoln.
Well, his critics faulted him for some of his railroad ventures, accused him of being a doughface, and questioned his intellectual capacity for a high government position, though. In the end, Smith's selection for Secretary of the Interior had much to do with his campaign efforts on behalf of Lincoln and their friendship.
Right.
Smith, he would serve less than 2 years before resigning due to poor health, and was replaced by John Palmer Usher. And he was like, yeah.
Right. Oh, wow. Southern Democrats, they dominated the Supreme Court in the period before Lincoln took office.
Sure did.
And their unpopular ruling in the 1857 case of Dred Scott versus Sanford had done much to invigorate the Republican cause in the North. Lincoln took office. The death of Peter Vivian Daniel had left a vacant seat on the Supreme Court. Ain't that crazy how it just happens that way?
Gotta do some appointing.
So Peter Vivian Daniel, he died, so there's a seat open on the Supreme Court. 2 more vacancies arose in early 1861 due to the death of John McLean and resignation of John Archibald.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Right. And the resignation about John Archibald Campbell.
Damn. So this dude gets to appoint 3 people right in his first year. Well, Noah Haynes Swain, Samuel Freeman Miller, and David Davis, they were all nominated by Lincoln and confirmed by the Senate in 1862. Congress added a 10th seat on the court through the passage of the 10th Circuit Act of 1863, and Lincoln again appointed another person, this time a war Democrat named Stephen Johnson Field. After Roger Taney died in 1864, Lincoln again appointed another.
Holy shit.
Jeez. Dude, he just appointed 5 guys. It's got to be like a record.
Damn.
Secretary of Treasury, he appointed Selman Chase. Oh, look at that, to the position of Chief Justice. Lincoln's appointments gave Northern Unionists a majority on the court, clearly. Lincoln also appointed 27 judges to the United States District Courts during his time in office.
Wow.
Gonna change.
That was like a whole facelift right there to America. Wow. By the time Lincoln assumed office, 7 states, guess what? We're Confederates now. And those Confederate states also seized federal property within their bounds.
What's Lincoln going to do now? He clearly stated in his inauguration he wasn't going to allow that.
What? But the United States retained control of major military installations at Fort Sumter, for now, near Charleston, Fort Pickens, near Pensacola, which is in Florida.
Well, yeah, because they're not storming a freaking fort.
Right.
Yeah.
Less secure than Fort Pickens and situated in the successionist hotbed of South Carolina, old Fort Sumter had to go. It emerged as an important symbolic issue in both the North and the South during early 1861 and pretty much the whole war.
Any hope Lincoln might have had about using time to his advantage and addressing the crisis was shattered on his first full day in office when he read a letter from Major Robert Anderson, who was the commander at Fort Sumter. It stated that his troops would run out of provisions within 4 to 6 weeks. And no way to get them.
Yeah. Wow.
At a meeting March 7th, General Winfield Scott, the top-ranking general in the Army at this time, and John Totten, who was the Army's chief engineer, they said that simply reinforcing the fort was not possible. Although Secretary of Navy Gideon Welles, he disagreed. He said, let's try it.
Yeah, we can get something in there. Maybe we can get it down on the coast or something. I don't know.
At least get the passageway from the coast, right there. So at least get some supplies in there.
Scott, he advised Lincoln that it would take a large fleet, 25,000 troops, and several months of training in order to defend the fort.
You ain't got several months.
13th of March, 1861, Postmaster General Blair, strongest proponent in the cabinet for standing firm at Fort Sumter, introduced Lincoln to his brother-in-law, Gustavus V. Fox. Fox presented a plan to Lincoln. He goes, guess what? We can take this Navy and we can resupply and reinforce the fort. The plan had been approved by Scott during the last month of the previous administration, but Buchanan had rejected it.
Oh. So why didn't Scott just represent the plan?
Right. So on 15th of March, Lincoln asked each cabinet member to provide a written answer to the question. Assuming it is to be possible to now provision Fort Sumter under all circumstances, is it wise to attempt it? Ooh, I bet you that was a hard question for everybody.
Well, only Blair gave his unconditional approval to the plan. No decision was reached, but Lincoln personally dispatched Fox, Stephen Hurlbut, and Ward Lamont to South Carolina to assess the situation. The recommendations that came back were that reinforcement was both necessary, since secessionist feeling ran high and threatened the fort, and it was also feasible, despite Anderson's misgivings.
Right.
March 28th, Scott recommended that both Pickens and Sumter be abandoned, basing his decisions more on political than military grounds.
Right. Well, and plus Lincoln
just give it to him.
Right. We weren't coming in forcefully. But he did say I have to keep federal ground.
Yeah, the next day, a deeply agitated Lincoln presented Scott's proposal to the cabinet. He's like, I don't want to do this, but this is our highest knowledgeable guy, apparently.
Son of a shit. Blair, he was now joined by Wells and Chase in support and reinforcement. Bates, he was non-committal. Cameron was non-in-attendance. Seward and Smith opposed resupply. Later that very day, Old Abe gave Fox the order to begin assembling a squadron to reinforce Fort Sumter. Lincoln's policy of resupplying Fort Sumter and Fort Pickens was designed to deny the right of succession without resorting to violence. Right. If we can just pack those frickin' forts up, dude, maybe.
Keep our men there. What are they going to do? Besides attack it.
Right. All doing this, he hoped that it would allow the administration to maintain support among both Northerners and Southern Unionists, which there were a lot of Southern Unionists, as we had mentioned in our other series.
With the Fort Sumter mission ready to go, Lincoln sent State Department Clerk Robert Chew to inform South Carolina Governor Francis Pickens of the impending resupply of the fort. That message delivered to Governor Pickens April 8th. The information was telegraphed that night to Confederate President Jefferson Davis in Richmond. The Confederate cabinet was already meeting to discuss the Sumter crisis, and on April 10th, Davis, he said, We're going to demand the surrender of the fort and bombard it if the demand's not met.
Ooh, Jefferson Davis, I can give you this, man. This dude was a go-getter. I mean, I don't know if it was him making decisions or if it was like Abe and his cabinet or whatever, how he operated his government. But, man, he made tough decisions.
Well, he did have a Secretary of War and all that shit, too. So, well, an attack, as we know, was initiated April 12th, and the fort surrendered the next day. The relief expedition sent by the Union arrived too late to intervene.
So they're thinking about the South's like, you know what? Let's throw the first punch.
We done did it now, boys. Well,
they
turning back.
They got to be thinking. You know, he said he's not gonna do any violence. Lincoln said, but he's only sending in a huge amount of troops and ammo and supplies, where a attack afterwards would be freaking impossible. You'd imagine if they got 25,000 men down there. There'd be no way. Fort Sumter would have been the last battle of the war.
Well, they wouldn't even have tried it, and there probably hadn't been no war.
Right. Crazy shit. 15th of April, following the Battle of Fort Sumter, Lincoln, he declared that a state of rebellion existed.
Do you think?
And he called up a force of 75,000 state militiamen to serve 3 months' term. While northern states rallied to the request, border states such as Missouri refused to provide soldiers. Like, no, this is your guys' fight, man. We're over here. Lincoln also called Congress into a special session to begin in July.
Can't be too special.
Right. 4 months away. In July of 1875. You guys, please come to the Capitol.
Save the date.
Though an in-session Congress could potentially affect his freedom of action, Lincoln needed Congress to authorize funds to fight the war. On the advice of Winfield Scott, old Abe asked a political ally to offer General Robert E. Lee command of the Union forces. But Lee says, I'd love the Union, but I love my Virginia much, much more.
Sure do. Union soldiers in southern states burned federal facilities to prevent southern forces from taking control of them, while Confederate sympathizers rioted in Baltimore. To ensure the security of the Capitol, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus in Maryland and ignored a court order to release John Merriman from prison. So Merriman was arrested for his involvement in the riots. Yeah.
Right. There's like a whole thing or something.
Well, maybe we'll do something on him. Obviously, clearly, there's something there.
Right.
While Lincoln struggled to maintain order in Maryland and other border states, Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Tennessee, they all seceded from the Union soon after.
Gotta.
North Carolina was indeed the last state to secede, doing so May 20th.
Well, North Carolina kind of had to.
Right. What are you going to do now?
Like
You're in between South Carolina and Virginia. You're like, what the dude? Can't do nothing here.
Tennessee, right on the
They got
other
the
side.
coast. That's about it.
That'd be insane if they would have stayed a Union state. Well, he'd kind of like blocked in. Well, actually, it would have been probably the first state to get
You know what's crazy?
ran over.
The Civil War, it wasn't like states were conquered and like readmitted to the Union during the war. It was just like cities in the states. Well, some was still Confederate, some was still taken control of by the Union, but like no state actually was like conquered all the way.
Right.
Which is weird.
Insane. With the succession of several states, old Abe's Republicans enjoyed large majorities in both House of the Congress.
Yeah, I would assume so.
All right, Senate and the House were theirs. War Democrats such as Andrew Johnson of Tennessee also supported many of Lincoln's policies. Though Copperheads, which were peace Democrats, they advocated peace with the Confederacy. From the start, it was clear that the bipartisan support would be essential to success in the war effort.
What did the Confederates think they were going to do, though? Because it's not like they were expanding.
No.
There was no way they were expanding west without the USA. They could have had peace and be like, okay, say the Confederate States exist. And we consider you guys a country.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're not expanding west.
Well,
because that would lead to literally the Indian Wars.
It'll be a civil war that would have lasted years because Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico.
It would have lasted just as like how all the Indian Wars did.
Right.
Been never ending.
It would have been insane.
Crazy.
From the start, it was clear that bipartisan support would be essential to success in the war. And any action, such as the appointment of generals, could alienate factions on both sides. Ooh. Lincoln appointed several political generals to curry favor with various groups, especially the Democrats.
Yeah, to keep them in line.
Yeah.
On its return, July 1861, Congress supported Lincoln's war proposals, providing appropriations for the expansion of the army to 500,000 men.
They needed it.
Organizing the army would prove to be a challenge for Lincoln and the War Department, as many professional officers resisted civilian control, while many state militias sought to act autonomously.
Right. They were like, dude.
We're a state militia. We don't have to do nothing with the
Right.
federal.
That was the problem, too. The country was still young enough to not really be, it was a country, but each state was their own country back then, and they had their own shit. That's why it's just crazy. It's just insane when you look back at it.
Knowing that the success in the war required the support of local officials and mobilizing soldiers, Lincoln used patronage powers and personal diplomacy to ensure that Northern leaders remained devoted to the war effort. You got to appease these guys or else they're going to turn against you and then everything falls apart. That's fucking politics.
Right. Lincoln succeeded in rallying the North against secession. He also was determined to attack the Confederate capital of Richmond, which was located just 100 miles from Washington, which is crazy as well. Lincoln, he was disappointed by the state of the War Department and Navy Department, and Scott counseled that the Army needed more time to train. But Lincoln nonetheless ordered an offensive. It's like, we don't have time. As the aged Scott was unable to lead the Army himself, General Irvin McDowell, he led a force of 30,000 men south, where he met a force led by Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard. This was the First Battle of Bull Run. The old rebel army dealt the Union a major defeat, ending any hope of a quick end to the war. Mm-hmm. Lincoln was like, they mean business.
Following the secession of 4 states after this Battle of Fort Sumter, one of Lincoln's major concerns was that of the slave-holding border states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. He said they might join the Confederacy now.
Right.
Of these 4 states, Lincoln was least concerned about Delaware, which had proportionally large pro-Union population.
All right.
Due to its location, Maryland remained a critical part of the Union. Yeah, it's right there.
Mm-hmm.
He also continued to suppress Southern sympathizers in the states, but he refused to take harsher measures against them.
Oh, right. He was just like, man, he's just trying to defer any type of...
Obviously, you don't want to do anything that can set somebody off.
Crazy. Maryland's election of Unionist Governor Augustus Bradford in November of 1861 ensured that Maryland would remain part of the Union. Perhaps even more critical than Maryland was Kentucky, which provided access to key rivers and served as a gateway to Tennessee and the Midwest. Hoping to avoid upsetting the delicate balance in the state, old Lincoln, he publicly ordered military leaders to respect Kentucky's declared neutrality, but quietly provided support to Kentucky Unionists.
Oh, no shit.
The Confederates were the first to violate this neutrality, seizing control of the town of Columbus, while the Union would capture the important town of
Paducah. Like Kentucky, Missouri controlled access to key rivers and had a large pro-Confederate population. Lincoln appointed General John Fremont to ensure Union control of the area. Fremont alienated many in the state by declaring martial law and issuing a proclamation freeing slaves that belonged to rebels. Lincoln removed Fremont and reversed the order, but Missouri emerged as the most problematic of the border states for Lincoln, and it would continue to go into the 1865.
Right.
After the defeat at the First Battle of Bull Run, Lincoln summoned Major General George McClellan to replace McDowell.
Which wasn't a great idea.
Lincoln's about to be the, the Bears.
Right.
Or the Browns.
The Browns, yeah.
Fucking head coach every other year.
McClellan, he had won minor battles in the Western Virginia campaign, and those victories had allowed Unionist West Virginia to hold the Wheeling Convention and eventually succeed from Virginia. With Lincoln's support, McClellan rejected Scott's Anaconda Plan, instead proposing a strike against Virginia, which would end the war with one climatic battle, which it would have.
Yeah, but the Anaconda Plan was probably smarter. You go and you go around them and constrict them.
You squeeze them in, which it took 5 years to do that, which ain't bad.
Well, yes.
After Scott retired in late 1861, Lincoln appointed McClellan General-in-Chief of all Union armies. McClellan, a young West Point grad, railroad executive, Pennsylvania Democrat, he took several months to plan and attempt his Peninsula campaign, which we did.
Of course. Well, that campaign's objective was to capture Richmond by moving the Army of Potomac by boat to the Virginia Peninsula and then overland to the Confederate capital. McClellan's repeated delays frustrated Lincoln and Congress, as did his position that no troops were needed to defend Washington. Well, that's stupid. In response to Bull Run, Congress established a joint committee on the conduct of the war because they were so pissed at what went wrong, and they did that to oversight military operations. Throughout the war, the committee would investigate generals deemed incompetent or sufficiently aggressive.
Yes.
The overwhelming majority would be of Democratic
it was too.
Generals.
McClellan was terrible. Aside from the committee's activities, Congress, they would generally defer to Lincoln's leadership throughout the war, obviously, commander-in-chief. A group of congressmen known as the Radical Republicans. They often became frustrated with old Abe's conduct of the war and reluctance to immediately push abolition. But Lincoln, he was able to maintain good relations with many of the Radical Republicans, including Senator Charles Sumner. Congressional Democrats, on the other hand, they tended to oppose Lincoln's policy regarding both the war and slavery.
Yeah, what else is new? January 1862, Lincoln, frustrated by months of inaction, ordered McClellan to begin the offensive by the end of February or else. Well, when McClellan failed still to launch his attack, members of Congress urged Lincoln to replace him with McDowell or Fremont, but Lincoln decided to retain McClellan as the commander of the Army of the Potomac over either potential replacement. He did, however, remove him as general-in-chief of the Army in May, leaving the office vacant for now.
Right.
He's like, we'll give him a chance to see what he can do here, but...
Didn't do anything. McClellan.
No, he did, but he got his ass...
Right. And plus, he never pursued.
Yeah.
That's his problem. McClellan, he moved against Confederate forces in March, and the Army of Potomac fought the bloody but inconclusive Battle of Seven Pines at the end of May. Following that very battle, General Lee, he took command of the Confederate forces in Virginia, and he led his forces to victory. Everybody always thought he was the commander of the whole Confederate Army.
Well, he was...
At the end.
In, late 1864? Yeah, Virginia was just his shit.
Right.
Well, it was the most important army, though.
Right. And he led his forces to victory in a 7 days battle, which effectively brought the Peninsula Campaign to a close, and McClellan
sure did.
A failure. Late June 1862, while the Army of the Potomac was fighting the 7 days battle, Old Abe, he said, you know what, John Pope, I want you to command the newly formed Army of Virginia. Oh, so we got two Army of Virginias.
That wouldn't last long.
Right.
July 11th, Lincoln summoned Henry Halleck from the Western Theater of the War to take command as General-in-Chief. Shortly thereafter, Lincoln asked Ambrose Burnside to replace McClellan, and we already know what happened there, as commander of the Army of the Potomac. But Burnside, who was close friends with McClellan, declined the post.
And Burnside was a better general than McClellan.
Yeah, but he still sucked.
He did.
Pope's forces then moved south towards Richmond, and in late August, the Army of Virginia met the Confederate Army in that second Battle of Bull Run.
Which was not any better than the first.
Which the Union didn't fare any better. Following that battle, Lincoln turned to McClellan again, placing him in command of the Army of Virginia as well as the Potomac.
Oh, wow.
They just got, consolidated.
Right. Look at McClellan. Shortly after McClellan's return to command, General Lee's forces crossed the Potomac into Maryland, leading to the Battle of Antietam, September 1862. The ensuing Union victory was among the bloodiest in American history. It led Lincoln to announce that he would issue an Emancipation Proclamation on the 1st of January, 1863. Which he did,
and we'll have a little bit more on that later on.
Following this very battle, McClellan resisted the president's demand that he pursue Lee's retreat and exposed army. He's like, no.
Stupid.
Which he would have got him.
Well, then 1862 brought on some midterm elections, and that brought the Republicans severe losses due to sharp disfavor with the administration over its failure to deliver a speedy end to the war,
right,
as well as rise in inflation, new taxes, rumors of corruption, the suspension of habeas corpus, the military draft law, and fears that freed slaves would undermine the labor market.
Right.
The Emancipation Proclamation gained votes for the Republicans in the rural areas of New England and the upper Midwest, but it lost votes in the cities and the lower Midwest.
Sure did. Wow. After the 18...
See, even the North was like, we're not sold on this no slavery stuff.
Right.
Or at least allowing these free guys in here.
Right. After the 1862 midterms, Lincoln, frustrated with McClellan's continued inactivity, he said, guess what, McClellan? You're going. And Burnside, whether you like it or not.
I was going to say, guess what, Burnside? You don't have a choice now.
So Burnside, he took command. Against the advice of the president, Burnside prematurely launched an offensive across he's like, all right, I'm just going to be just guy out here just doing shit. He goes, we're going to the Rappahannock River. And he was stunningly defeated by Lee at the Battle of Fredericksburg. That was bad. That happened in December of 1862. Not only had Burnside been defeated on the battlefield, but his soldiers were disgruntled and undisciplined. I think Burnside was just pissed.
Desertions during 1863 were in the thousands, and they increased after Fredericksburg. The defeat also amplified the criticisms of radical Republicans such as Lyman Trumbull and Benjamin Wade, who they believed that Lincoln had mishandled the war, particularly with regards to his selection of generals. Yeah. Well, following the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lincoln reassigned Burnside to the Western Theater and replaced Burnside with General Joseph Hooker, who had seen several battles of the Eastern Theater at this time, and he didn't fare no better.
With the war dragging on and on and on and no end in sight, Lincoln signed the Enrollment Act, which provided for the first military draft ever in United States history. The draft sparked harsh reactions, including draft riots in New York City and other locations. April 1863, Hooker began his offensive towards Richmond, and his army encountered Lee's army at the Battle of Chancellorsville.
Rip Stonewall.
Right. Despite possessing a large army, the Union suffered a major loss at Chancellorsville, though the Confederates also suffered a high number of casualties, including the death of General Stonewall Jackson, got shot by his own men. That's why you don't fight at dark in the woods.
And his arm is buried completely separate from his body.
Right.
Following the Confederate victory, Lee decided to take the offensive, launching the Gettysburg Campaign in June of 1863. Lee hoped the Confederate victories in the offensive would empower Lincoln's political opponents and convince the North that the Union couldn't win the war. After Hooker failed to stop Lee in the early stages of his advance, Lincoln replaced Hooker with General George Meade.
Yeah.
Lee, he led his army into Pennsylvania and was followed by Meade's Army of the Potomac. While many in the North fretted over Lee's advance, Lincoln saw the offensive as an opportunity to destroy a Confederate army.
Yeah.
So we can take them out right here.
Right.
They're on the move. They were on the defensive this whole time.
Tell you, like I said, in the original series, Gettysburg was a major turning point for both armies. Whoever won this battle was going to win the war.
Pretty much.
The Confederates and the Union armies, guess what? Met at the Battle of Gettysburg that happened on the 1st of July. The battle fought over 3 days, resulted in the highest number of casualties in the war. Along with the Union victory in the siege of Vicksburg, the Battle of Gettysburg is often referred to as the turning point in the war. Though the battle ended with a Confederate retreat, Lincoln was dismayed that Meade had failed to destroy Lee's army. Feeling that Meade was a competent commander despite his failure, Lincoln allowed Meade to remain in command of the Army of Potomac. He says, I know you'll do better. It was a big battle.
Yeah.
Lost a lot of men. The Eastern Theater would be locked in a stalemate for the remainder of 1863.
And much of 1864, really, if you want to think about it. Petersburg.
Yeah.
On November 1863, Lincoln was invited to Gettysburg to dedicate the First National Cemetery and honor the soldiers who had fallen. That results in his Gettysburg Address and became a core statement of the American political values. Defying Lincoln's prediction that the world would little know nor long remember what we say here, the address became the most quoted speech in American history 7 years ago.
Oh, boy.
In 272 words and 3 minutes, Lincoln asserted the nation was not born in 1789 following the ratification of the Constitution, but with the 1776 Declaration of Independence.
Right. He defined the war as an effort dedicated to the principles of liberty and equality for all. The emancipation of slaves was now part of the national war effort. He declared that the deaths of so many brave soldiers would not be in vain, that slavery would end as a result of the losses, and the future of democracy in the world would be assured, that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Lincoln concluded that the Civil War had a profound objective, a new birth of freedom in the nation.
Jeez. Well, compared to the Eastern Theater of the war, Lincoln exercised less direct control over operations that took place west of the Appalachians. End of 1861, Lincoln ordered Don Carlos Buell, commander of the Department of Ohio, and Henry Halleck, Fremont's replacement as the commander of the Missouri, to coordinate support with the Unionists in Kentucky and eastern Tennessee. Ulysses S. Grant quickly earned Lincoln's attention, winning the first significant Union victory at the Battle of Fort Henry, and earning a national reputation with his victory at the Battle of Fort Donelson. Yeah, Fort Donelson, this dude's career was like this, and then Fort Donelson and went boom.
He was able to drink 2 times as much.
And smoke 17 cigars instead of 12.
Right. The Confederates were driven from Missouri early in the war as a result of the March 1862 Battle of Pea Ridge. In April of 1862, United States naval forces under the command of David Farragut, they captured the important port city of New Orleans.
Yep.
That was the beginning of the end. Actually, that was the beginning and end, and then Gettysburg was... Grant, he won further victories at the Battle of Shiloh and the Siege of Vicksburg, which cemented Union control of the Mississippi River. And it's considered one of the turning points of the war. October 1863, Lincoln appointed Grant as commander of the newly created Division of the Mississippi, giving him command of the Western Theater.
Grant and Generals Hooker, George Thomas, and William Sherman, they led the Union to another major victory at the Third Battle of Chattanooga. And that happened in November, driving Confederate forces out of Tennessee. The capture of Chattanooga left Georgia vulnerable to attack, raising the possibility of a Union march to the Atlantic Ocean, which would divide the Confederacy, and we all know that would happen.
Sure in hell did. April 1861, Lincoln announced the Union blockade of all southern ports. Commercial ships could not get insurance, and regular traffic ended. The South blundered in embargoing cotton exports in 1861 before the blockade was effective. By the time they realized the mistake, it was too late. King Cotton was dead, as the South could export less than 10% of its cotton.
It's crazy.
The Confederate Navy briefly challenged Union naval supremacy by building an ironclad warship known as the CSS Virginia. But the Union responded by building its own. Guess what? USS Monitor, baby, which effectively neutralized the Confederate naval threat.
Yeah, when you don't control anything,
not at all.
what are you going to do? That blockade shut down 10 Confederate seaports with railheads that moved almost all the cotton, especially New Orleans, Mobile, Alabama, and Charleston, South Carolina. June 1861, warships were stationed off the principal southern ports, and a year later, nearly 300 ships were in service.
Ooh.
Historians argue that the blockade was a powerful weapon that eventually ruined the southern economy at the cost of a few lives in combat.
Right.
A few lives. Practically, the entire Confederate cotton crop was useless,
Right.
although it was sold to Union traders, which costed the Confederacy its main source of income. Critical imports were scarce, and the coastal trade was largely ended as well. Yeah, when you shut down their economy, what the hell are they going to do?
Yeah. The measure of the blockade's success was not the few ships that slipped through, but the thousands that never tried it. Merchant ships owned in Europe could not get insurance, and they were too slow to evade the blockade. They simply stopped calling at Confederate ports.
Hey, North, what do you got?
Grant was one of the few senior generals that Lincoln did not know personally, and the president was not able to visit the Western theater of the war. Nonetheless, Lincoln came to appreciate the battlefield exploits of Ulysses.
That's crazy.
Grant.
They met like once or twice.
That's it.
Responding to criticism of Grant after Shiloh, Lincoln had said, "I can't spare this man. He fights." March 1864, Grant was summoned to Washington to succeed Halleck as general-in-chief, while Halleck took on the role of chief of staff.
Oh.
Meade remained in formal command of the Army of the Potomac, but Grant would travel with the Army, and he said, I'll take it from here, Meade.
Right.
You'll still get paid. Lincoln also obtained Congress's consent to reinstate Grant for the rank of lieutenant general, which no United States officer had held since George Washington.
Ooh-wee.
That's
no
crazy.
Shit. Damn. Grant, he ordered me to destroy Lee's army, while he ordered General Sherman, now in command of Union forces in the Western Theater, to capture Atlanta. Lincoln strongly approved of Grant's new strategy.
I bet he did. He's like, I've been waiting for this shit since literally April of 1861.
Right. He approved of Grant's new strategy, which focused on the destruction of Confederate armies rather than the capture of Confederate cities. 2 months after being promoted to general-in-chief, Grant embarked upon his bloody Overland campaign. This campaign is often characterized as a war of attrition, given high Union losses at battles such as the Battle of Wilderness and Cold Harbor. But you had to, man. You got to do it.
Yeah. Well, even though they had the advantage of fighting on the defensive, the Confederate forces had a similarly high level of casualties.
Yep.
The high casualty figures alarmed many in the North, but despite the losses, Lincoln continued to support Grant. While Grant's campaign continued, General Sherman led Union forces from Chattanooga to Atlanta, defeating Confederate generals Joseph Johnson and John Bell Hood along the way. Sherman's victory in the September 2nd Battle of Atlanta boosted Union morale, breaking the pessimism that had been set throughout 1864. Like, maybe we can actually do this thing.
Possibly. Hood's forces that left the Atlanta area to menace Sherman's supply lines and invade Tennessee in the Franklin-Nashville campaign. General John Schofield defeated Hood at the Battle of Franklin, and General Thomas dealt Hood a massive defeat at the Battle of Nashville, effectively destroying Hood's army altogether. Lincoln authorized the Union Army to target the Confederate infrastructure, such as plantations, railroads, and bridges. He did that in hoping to shatter the South's morale and weaken its economic ability to continue fighting. That's what you got to do.
Well, upon leaving Atlanta and his base of supplies, Sherman's army marched east with an unknown destination, laying waste to about 20% of farms in Georgia in its march to the sea.
All right.
Scorched earth, baby. He reached the Atlantic Ocean at Savannah, Georgia in December of 1864. Following that march, Sherman turned north through South Carolina and North Carolina to approach the Lee's army from the south. At this point, it's done.
It was over. During the Valley campaigns of 1864, Confederate General Jubal Early, he crossed the Potomac and advanced into Maryland. July 11th, 2 days after defeating Union forces under General Lew Wallace in the Battle of Monocacy, Early attacked Fort Stevens, an outpost that was on the defensive perimeter of Washington.
They could see the capital.
Close as they got. Lincoln watched the combat from an exposed position. At one point during the skirmish, Captain Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. is said to have shouted at him, "Get down, you damn fool, before you get shot." But this is commonly regarded as fake, false. Afterward, Grant created the Army of the Shenandoah and put Sheridan in command of that. Sheridan, he quickly repelled Early and suppressed the Confederate guerrillas in the Shenandoah Valley. It was just over.
And then the siege of Petersburg came along and up into the Appomattox, and it's over. Well, that was Lincoln during the war. All right, let's look at 1864 election, which it took place during the Civil War, and according to the Miller Center for the Study of the Presidency, the election was noteworthy for occurring at all, which is unprecedented exercise in the midst of a civil war. Yeah, you don't usually hold an election in the war, let alone a civil war. Lincoln should have just stayed. A group of Republican dissidents who called themselves the Radical Republicans formed a party named the Radical Democracy Party, and they nominated John C. Fremont as their candidate for president. Fremont later withdrew and endorsed Lincoln.
War Democrats, they joined with Republicans as the National Union Party.
Right, that's what I said earlier, that Lincoln didn't run as a Republican again.
Right. Well, it was a Union Party during the Civil War.
It was a National Union Party.
Right.
Yeah, they just did it right before this election.
Right. And they had Lincoln at the head of the ticket. The National Union Party was a temporary name used to attract war Democrats and Southern border state Unionists who would not vote for the Republican Party. A little trickery. They faced off against the regular Democratic Party, including Peace Democrats. Don't everybody know, hey, there's no more Republican on the ticket.
But Lincoln...
I'm going to go to National Union.
Who's this new Lincoln feller for this Union Party? Despite recent setbacks in the Western theater of the war, the June 1864 National Union National Convention, they nominated Lincoln for president, clearly. Though Hamlin, the vice president, hoped to be renominated as that, the convention instead nominated Andrew Johnson, who was the military governor of Tennessee and a Democrat.
Oh.
Southern Democrat. Yeah. Well, Lincoln had refused to weigh in on his preferred running mate, and the convention chose to nominate Johnson, who was a Southern more Democrat, in order to boost the party's appeal to the Unionists of both parties.
Oh, wow. Now it's making sense that they assassinated Lincoln. The party platform called for the unconditional surrender of the Confederacy and also endorsed open immigration policies. Oh, shit. The construction of a transcontinental railroad and the establishment of a national currency.
Which, right, yeah, people don't even realize this. We don't even have one currency right now.
No.
All these territories still have, like, their own shit. That's crazy. It took until 1865 to even do that.
Insane. Plus, I think there's still, like, British pounds.
That's when the greenbacks, that's what the bills that we use now, the greenbacks came along.
By August, Republicans across the country experiencing feelings of extreme anxiety, fearing that Lincoln would be defeated. The outlook was so grim that Thurlow Weed told the president directly that his re-election was an impossibility. Wow.
Acknowledging this, Lincoln wrote and signed a pledge that, if he should lose the election, he would nonetheless defeat the Confederacy by an all-out military effort before turning over the White House. This morning, he says, as for some days past, it seems exceedingly probable that this administration will not be re-elected. Then it will be my duty to so cooperate with the president-elect as to save the Union between the election and the inauguration, as he will have secured his election on such ground that he cannot possibly save it afterwards.
Oh.
Right, yeah, I mean, I guess he's saying this war can't stand another president and power shift.
Right. As the Civil War progressed, political opinions within the Republican Party began to diverge. Senator Charles Sumner and Henry Wilson from Massachusetts, they wanted the Republican Party to advocate constitutional amendments to prohibit slavery and guarantee racial equality before the law. Initially, not all Northern Republicans supported such measures. Democratic leaders hoped that the radical Republicans would put forth their own ticket in the election.
The New York World newspaper, particularly interested in undermining the National Union Party, they ran a series of articles predicting a delay for the National Union Convention until late in 1864 to allow Fremont time to collect delegates to win the nomination.
Oh.
Fremont supporters in New York City established a newspaper called The New Nation, which declared in one of its initial issues that the National Union Convention would be a non-entity. The New York World also published false information to limit Lincoln's popularity. Oh, geez, smear campaigns and shit. New York always doing some dirty shit.
Yeah, shit, it's kind of like some Trump shit going on.
Right.
With the outcome of the Civil War still in doubt, some political leaders, including Salmon Chase, Benjamin Wade, and Horace Greeley, they opposed Lincoln's renomination on the grounds that he could not even win. Not even close. Chase himself became...
Chase, you're a bitch, because he put you in his cabinet.
Right. Well, Chase, he became the only candidate to contest Lincoln's renomination actively. But he withdrew in March when a slew of Republican officials, including some within the state of Ohio, upon whom Chase's campaign depended on if he were to be endorsed, they endorsed Lincoln. They're like, sorry, bud.
Well, that's because he was still popular, Lincoln was, with most members of the Republican Party, and the National Union Party nominated him for a second term, like we said, at their convention in Baltimore on June 7th through 8th, 1864. The party platform included these goals: pursuit of the war until the Confederacy surrendered unconditionally, a constitutional amendment for the abolition of slavery, aid to disabled Union veterans, continued European neutrality, enforcement of the Monroe Doctrine, which is it's a position that opposes European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, yeah, we definitely don't want that.
And encouragement of immigration and construction of transcontinental railroad. It also praised the use of black troops and Lincoln's management of the war.
There you go. Perfect. With incumbent Vice President Hannibal Hamlin remaining indifferent about the prospect of a second term in office, Andrew Johnson, former senator, current military governor of Tennessee, he's named as Lincoln's vice presidential running mate. Oh, here we go again. Back in the day when you had different parties. He had been governor of Tennessee from 1853 to 1857. Elected by the legislature to the Senate in
He's the
1857.
current, right now, military governor of Tennessee.
In his congressional service, he sought passage of the Homestead Bill, which was enacted soon after he left his Senate seat in 1862.
All right, when the southern slave states, including Tennessee, seceded, he remained firmly with the Union. He was the only sit-in senator from a Confederate state who did not resign his seat upon learning of his state's secession.
Oh, wow.
1862, Lincoln appointed him as military governor of Tennessee, which didn't really mean much.
Right.
Well, that was after most of it had been retaken, though. 1864, Johnson was a logical choice as a running mate for Lincoln, who wished to send a message of national unity in his re-election campaign, especially to ensure the electoral votes of the border states.
Right.
Others who were considered for their nomination at one point or another were former Senator Daniel Dickinson, Major General Benjamin Butler, Major General William Rosecrans, Joseph Holt, and former Treasury Secretary and Senator John Dix.
President Rosecrans, huh? That would have been weird.
I would assume they wouldn't have wanted to ran against Lincoln anyways.
Right. The Democratic Party nomination, which were George McClellan from New Jersey, Thomas Seymour, former governor of Connecticut. Democratic Party was bitterly split between war Democrats and peace Democrats. A group further divided among competing factions. Moderate peace Democrats who supported the war against Confederacy, such as Horatio Seymour, they were preaching the wisdom of a negotiated peace. So you said Seymour and McClellan, huh? Who ran against them? McClellan?
After the Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, moderate peace Democrats proposed a negotiated peace that would secure Union victory. They believed this was the best course of action because an armistice could finish the war without devastating the South.
True.
Radical peace Democrats known as Copperheads, such as Thomas Seymour, declared the war to be a failure and favored an immediate end to hostilities without securing Union victory.
Well, that's nice.
Without securing the Union victory? I don't know about that guy.
Right. George McClellan vied for the presidential nomination. Additionally, friends of Horatio Seymour insisted on placing his name before the convention, which was held in Chicago. That was August 29th to the 31st. But on the day before the organization of that body, Horatio Seymour announced positively that he would not be a candidate.
No, so old McClellan lucked out.
He's like, I'm not going to do it, guys. I just don't have the support. I'm not going to go through it, man. Since the Democrats were divided by issues of war and peace, they sought a strong candidate who could unify their party. The compromise was to nominate pro-war General George McClellan for president and anti-war Representative George Pendleton for vice president. Okay, so you got a pro-war and anti-war. Maybe you can get
Doubt it.
some kind of terms there.
Well, McClellan, who was a war Democrat, he was nominated for president over the Copperhead Thomas Seymour, we know. Pendleton, a close associate of the Copperhead Clement Vallandigham, he balanced the ticket since he was known for having strongly opposed the war.
Right.
The convention adopted a peace platform, a platform McClellan personally rejected. McClellan, he supported the continuation of the war and the restoration of the Union.
Right.
But the party platform, written by Vallandigham, I guess his name, he opposed this position.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, they can't even get their shit straight still.
Neither the Republicans either.
Yeah, that's right.
Fucking insane. Nation divided indeed. Mm-hmm. The Radical Democracy Convention assembled in Ohio with delegates arriving on the 29th of May.
This is for their party, clearly.
Right. In 1864, this is the Radical Democratic Party nomination that we were talking about here. New York Times reported that the hall, which the convention organizers had planned to use, had been double booked. Sure has. And they had an opera going on. Damn, they got pushed off for opera, huh?
That's today's Westminster
Right.
dog show.
Right. Almost all delegates were instructed to support California Senator John Fremont, with a major exception being the New York delegation, which was composed of war Democrats such as Ulysses S. Grant. Various estimates of the number of delegates were reported in the press, but the New York Times reported 156 delegates, but the number generally reported elsewhere was 350 delegates. The delegates came from 15 states and the District of Columbia. They adopted the name the Radical Democracy Party. Oh, shit.
A supporter of Grant was appointed the chairman. The platform was passed with little discussion, and a series of resolutions that bogged down the convention proceedings were voted down decisively. The convention nominated Fremont for president. He accepted on June 4th, 1864. In his letter, he stated that he would step aside if the National Union Convention would nominate someone other than Lincoln for president. Now, John Cochran, he was nominated for vice president of this party.
Moving on to the general election. Here it is, boys. 1864 election was the first time since 1812 that a presidential election took place during a war. For much of 1864, Lincoln himself believed he had little chance of being reelected. If he wanted to, he could just
say where there's not an election.
Right. Confederate forces had triumphed at the Battle of Mansfield, the Battle of Cold Harbor, the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads, the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, and the Battle of Crater. In addition, the war was continuing to take a very high toll in terms of casualties, with campaigns such as Grant's Overland Campaign, who just went in and was like, let's go. We're outnumbered them 5-1. We're going to lose some buddies. Let's
They're expendable.
The prospect of a long and bloody war was starting to make the idea of peace at all costs, offered by the Ultra Peace Democrats, look more desirable. They're like, our boys out there dying. We're losing all this product. Land's getting...
all this product.
Right. Land's getting demolished.
However, several political and military events eventually made Lincoln's re-election inevitable.
Oh.
In the first place, the Democrats had to confront the severe internal strains within their party at the Democratic National Convention. The political compromises made at the convention were contradictory and made McClellan's efforts to campaign seem inconsistent.
Oh.
Secondly, the Democratic National Convention influenced Fremont's campaign. Fremont was appalled at the Democratic platform, which he described as union with slavery.
3 weeks of discussions took place, Cochran and his supporters. Fremont withdrew from the race September 1864, just before the election, In a statement, Fremont declared that winning the Civil War was too important to divide the Republican Party anymore. Although he still felt that Lincoln was not going far enough. The defeat of McClellan was the greatest necessity. General Cochran, he agreed and withdrew with Fremont. September 23, 1864, Fremont also brokered a political deal in which Lincoln removed U.S. Postmaster General Montgomery Blair from office. Ooh, he goes, you know what? Everybody will back you, just get rid of that damn Montgomery. Nobody
They didn't like him.
Nobody did. Lincoln kind of did.
Apparently.
And on September 24th, Lincoln said, guess what, Blair? You gotta go. You gotta go.
But I lick my own stamps.
I know, buddy. You gotta go. McClellan's chances of victory faded after Fremont withdrew from the presidential race.
Well, lastly, the storm of Mobile Bay on August and the fall of Atlanta, September 2nd. Public confidence in the war effort was restored to the belief that victory is closer than thought. In the end, the Union Party mobilized the full strength of both the Republicans and the War Democrats under the slogan, "Don't change horses in the middle of a stream."
That's true.
It was energized as Lincoln made emancipation the central issue, and state Republican parties stressed the perfidy of the Copperheads.
All right. 24.4% of the voting age population, 76.3% eligible voters participated in this very election. The American Civil War was in progress, as we all know, and
Obviously.
would still be there even after the election, not knowing in a couple months it would be over with.
Right.
Because 11 southern states plus 2 claimed additional southern states had declared secession from the Union and formed the Confederates, as we all know. Only 25 states participated in this election. Louisiana and Tennessee had recently been recaptured. They chose presidential electors, but their votes were rejected by Congress due to having recently seceded from the Union. They're like, oh, hold on, guys. You ain't just going to come back into this son of a bitch and
Yeah, but if we appointed our people and none of those guys that seceded, what would it matter?
It's true. Both states had voted for Lincoln anyhow, so it wouldn't have changed the results in any case.
Well, 3 new states participated for the first time: Kansas, West Virginia, and Nevada. Despite Kentucky's state government never fully seceded, and Kentucky's Confederate government that was formed at the Russellville Convention being driven from the state in 1862, Commonwealth had an election participation rate decrease of almost 40% compared to the election of 1860.
Yeah, you can see that happening. McClellan, he won just 3 states: Kentucky, Delaware, and his home state of New Jersey. Lincoln won in every state he carried in 1860 except New Jersey. He also carried a state won 4 years ago by Stephen Douglas, Missouri, and also one carried by John Breckinridge, Maryland, and all 3 newly admitted states, Kansas, Nevada, West Virginia, obviously. Altogether, 212 electoral votes were counted to Congress for Lincoln, more than enough to win presidency, even if all the states in rebellion had participated and voted against him.
Well, the South didn't even matter anyway.
Right.
Lincoln, he was highly popular with the soldiers, and they in turn recommended him to their families back home. The following states allowed soldiers to cast ballots: California, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Michigan, Rhode Island, and Wisconsin. Out of the 40,247 Army votes cast, Lincoln received 30,000, which was 75%. McClellan, 9,201, which was 22%. And with the rest, 543 votes scattering around to other people, 1.3%. Only soldiers from Kentucky gave McClellan a majority of their votes, and he carried the Army vote in the state by a vote of 2,823 to 1,194, which was 70-30.
Oh.
Of the 1,129 counties making returns, Lincoln won in 728 of them, while McClellan carried 400, which was 65 to 35. One county in Iowa split evenly between Lincoln and McClellan.
Oh.
This was the last election the Republicans won in Maryland until 1896.
Oh, wow. Throughout the first year and a half of his presidency, Lincoln made it clear that the North was fighting the war to preserve the Union, but not to end slavery. I want you guys to know that. He goes, maybe the expansion, but whatever you got now, you're good, bud. You're good. Eat your food, man. Though unwilling to publicly declare the abolition of slavery as a war goal, Lincoln considered various plans that would provide for the eventual abolition of the slavery. Yeah, eventually you got to weed it out, as we said before. And he also explored the idea of compensated emancipation, including one proposal that he would have seen all Delaware slaves freed by 1872. He also met with Frederick Douglass and other black leaders, discussing the possibility of a colonization project in Central America.
Oh, jeez. Jeez. Well, abolitionists criticized Lincoln for his slowness in moving from his initial position of non-interference with slavery to one of emancipation. August 1862, in a letter to anti-slavery journalist Horace Greeley, Lincoln explained, "I would save the Union. I would save it the shortest way under the Constitution. The sooner the national authority can be restored, the nearer the Union will be the Union as it was. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery.
Ooh.
I could save the Union without freeing any slave. Right. I would do it," he says, "if I could. Right. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. Right. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." He said, "I just want to save the Union,
right.
man."
That's the number one thing right now. We'll deal with the rest later.
Right. As the Civil War continued, freeing the slaves became an important wartime measure for weakening the rebellion by destroying the economic base of its leadership class. August of 1861, Lincoln signed the Confiscation Act of 1861, which authorized court proceedings to confiscate the slaves of anyone who participated in or aided the Confederate war effort.
Okay, that makes sense.
The act, however, did not specify whether the slaves were free.
Oh.
April 1862, Lincoln signed a law abolishing slavery in Washington, D.C.
You got to do that.
And in June, he signed a law abolishing slavery in all federal territories.
Oh.
The following month, Lincoln signed the Confiscation Act of 1862, which declared that all Confederate slaves taking refuge behind Union lines were free.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Good for him. Well, this eventually led to the Emancipation Proclamation, which we all know and love. Union victories in 1861 and 1862 secured the border states, which in turn freed Lincoln's hand to pursue more aggressive anti-slavery policies. Additionally, many Northerners came to support abolition during the war due to the influence of religious leaders like Henry Ward Beecher and also journalists like Horace Greeley. Same month, Lincoln signed the Second Confiscation Act. He also privately decided that he would pursue emancipation as a war goal. Look at that. And this, my friends, is when shit changed. It pissed the South off with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Well, although before the war, Lincoln accepted the consensus that the federal government did not have the power to interfere with slavery in the states where it existed.
Right.
He now believed that under his power as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, under Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, he could, as a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion.
He had to find that loophole.
He said, "I could emancipate the slaves in the states in rebellion."
Right.
July 22nd, Lincoln read to his cabinet a preliminary draft of the proclamation calling for emancipation of all slaves in the Confederacy.
Right. Like, hey, if you guys can find your way up north here,
you're free. And then once we defeat the South, you're free.
Right. Just don't drink out of that water fountain or go in that building.
Oh, yeah. And you live in this neighborhood.
As the Union had suffered several defeats in the early part of the war, Seward, he convinced Old Abe to announce this emancipation plan after a significant Union victory, so that it would not seem like a move of desperation.
Now we just needed to find one.
And he did. Lincoln waited 2 months until after the Union victory at the Battle of Antietam. Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, year 1862, 5 days after the battle. It provided that in any states in rebellion on January 1st, 1863, the slaves would be free. Right. Yeah, good luck. Good luck leaving.
Well, Lincoln kept his promise, and January 1st, 1863, he issued the final Emancipation Proclamation declaring free the slaves in the 10 states that were still in rebellion.
Right.
The proclamation did not cover the nearly 500,000 slaves in the slaveholding border states that had remained in the Union, nor did it apply to Tennessee or West Virginia, both of which were largely under control of the Union forces. Also specifically exempted were New Orleans and 13 named parishes of Louisiana, which were mostly under federal control at the time of the proclamation. Why? All right. Okay.
Wow, that was left out of the history books. Makes sense. He said he didn't want to, if it's still existing, keep it. Wow.
Yeah, but all the other ones, regardless if they get the ones in the South back, they're going to be freed.
It's crazy. Unless they go to Louisiana. Or
Tennessee.
Or West Virginia. Wow. Despite these exemptions, the delayed effect of the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation, added a second purpose of the war, making its goal to end slavery, as well as restoring the Union. The proclamation was well received by Republicans, most of them at least, but many Democrats strongly disapproved, as we all know. And the latter party won several victories in 1862 midterm elections, while Democrats came in strong.
Okay. Let's take a look at Reconstruction during his presidency. As the southern states were subdued, critical decisions had to be made as to the leadership and policies of these states. Louisiana, which had a larger slave population than other Confederate states occupied early in the war, they became the center of discussion regarding Reconstruction under Lincoln and military governor Benjamin Butler.
I mean, that's a major port down there.
Yep. Butler and his successor Nathaniel P. Banks, they implemented a labor system in which free blacks worked as laborers on white-owned plantations.
Oh, fantastic.
This motto, which paid blacks wages, but also represented a continuation of plantation agriculture, was adopted throughout much of the South.
Right.
Banks also presided over the ratification of a new state constitution that banned slavery, but did not guarantee free blacks the right to vote.
Right.
That'll come down later.
Yeah, about 100 years, boys. After 1862, Democrats like Reverdy Johnson,
Okay, Reverdy.
he sought the withdrawal of the Emancipation Proclamation and amnesty for the Confederates. Oh. By contrast, radical Republicans like Sumner argued that rebel Southerners had lost all rights by attempting to succeed from the old Union. Why should they? We shouldn't even trust these bastards. In his 10% plan, Lincoln, he sought to find a middle ground, calling for the emancipation of Confederate slaves and the reintegration of Southern states. Once 10% of the voters in a state took an oath of allegiance to the United States and pledged to respect an Emancipation Proclamation and also the Constitution of the United States. How about that?
Only 10%?
Wow.
Jeez. Well, radical Republicans countered the Wade-Davis bill, which was a Reconstruction plan that included protections for the rights of freed Americans of African variety, which included protections for the rights of freed African Americans and required 50% of voters to swear the ironclad oath, indicating that they had never and would never support a rebellion against the United States.
Right.
As the Wade-Davis bill interfered with Lincoln's plans for the readmission of Louisiana and Arkansas, Lincoln pocket vetoed the bill in 1864.
Okay. Even as they cooperated on most other issues, Lincoln, congressional Republicans, they continued to clash over Reconstruction policies after the 1864 election. Many in Congress, they sought far-reaching reforms to Southern society that went beyond the abolition of slavery, and they refused to recognize Lincoln's reconstituted Southern governments. Disagreements with Congress prevented the passage of any Reconstruction bill or the recognition of governments in Arkansas and Louisiana. Wow, these guys.
As the war came to a close, Lincoln indicated an openness to some of the proposals of the radical Republicans, and he signed a bill creating the Freedmen's Bureau, BURU. Established as a temporary institution, the Freedmen's Bureau was designed to provide food and other supplies to free blacks in the South, and was also authorized to grant confiscated land to former slaves.
Oh.
Lincoln did not take a definitive stand on black suffrage voting, stating only that very intelligent blacks and those who had served in the military should be granted the right to vote. Hey, I say that goes for anybody very intelligent,
Right.
or at least know something.
Yes. Yes. Not just a race thing. That should be, you should have to take an IQ test and it has to be above 1.
Man, that singles out like 89% of the Democrats.
Yes. Historian Eric Foner, he notes that no one even knows what Lincoln would have done about Reconstruction had he served out his second term. Then he adds, unlike Sumner and other radicals, Lincoln did not see Reconstruction as an opportunity for a sweeping political and social revolution beyond emancipation. Right? He's like, no, we're not just going to tear everything apart and start over new. He had long made it clear for his opposition to the confiscation and redistribution of land. He believed, as most Republicans did in April of 1865, that the voting requirements should be determined by the states. States' rights, baby.
He assumed that political control in the South would pass to the white Unionists, reluctant secessionists, and forward-looking former Confederates.
Yes.
But time and again during the war, Lincoln, after initial opposition, had come to embrace positions first advanced by abolitionists and radical Republicans.
Oh.
Lincoln undoubtedly would have listened carefully to the outcry for further protection for the former slaves. It is entirely plausible to imagine Lincoln and Congress agreeing on the Reconstruction policy that encompassed federal protection for basic civil rights, plus limited black suffrage, along the lines Lincoln proposed just before his death.
They're here and there, right?
All right.
Take a look at the old 13th Amendment. December 1863. A proposed constitutional amendment that would outlaw slavery was introduced into Congress. Though the Senate voted for the amendment with the necessary 2/3 majority, but it did not have support in the House.
Why
is the Senate voting first?
Right.
And, well, on accepting the National Union Party nomination in 1864, Old Abe, he told the party that he would seek to ratify a constitutional amendment that would abolish slavery in the United States here going forward.
After winning, Lincoln made ratification of the 13th Amendment, as it would become known, a top priority.
Damn right.
With the aid of large Republican majorities in both houses of Congress, Lincoln believed he could permanently end the institution of slavery in the United States once and for all.
Right.
Though he had largely avoided becoming involved in congressional legislative processes, Lincoln gave the ratification struggle his full attention.
Had to.
You got to start lobbying people and saying it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than waiting for the 39th Congress to convene in March, Lincoln pressed the lame duck session of the 38th Congress to ratify the 13th Amendment as soon as possible. He said, we ain't waiting for this newly guys to come in. We got to get it done now.
Let's get it done, boys. After an extensive lobbying campaign by Lincoln and Seward, the House narrowly cleared the 2/3 threshold, 119 to 56.
Not narrowly, but...
Right. 13th Amendment was sent to the states for ratification. Secretary of State Seward proclaimed its adoption on 18th December, 1865.
Oh, poor Abe didn't get to see that go out, did he?
With the ratification of the 13th Amendment, some abolitionist leaders viewed their work as complete.
Well,
there's that.
These blacks can take it from here.
Right. Well, that black Frederick Douglass, he believed that slavery is not abolished until the black man has the ballot. Ooh-wee.
Probably true.
It's true.
All right. Let's take a look at some other domestic issues for Lincoln during his presidency.
Neither the blacks or the whites wanted women to vote.
Oh, that didn't happen until, 1920? Yeah, domestic issues.
True.
In the decades prior to Civil War, Southern congressmen had blocked the passage of various economic proposals, including federal funding for internal improvements, support for higher education. No, if we make these guys' life better, they won't conform.
All right.
They didn't want support for higher education, and they increased tariff rates designed to protect domestic manufacturing against foreign competition.
Oh.
With the secession of several, they opposed increased tariff rates.
All right.
So they didn't care if our shit was going out to the other fucking Democrats.
Yeah.
With the secession of several southern states, the Republicans dominated both houses of Congress and were free to do as they pleased.
Right.
Like, we're going to get this shit passed now. Could have been one of the best things that ever happened, though, because maybe they got a lot of laws that might not have been passed with the South.
Very true. Lincoln adhered to the Whig understanding of separation of powers under the Constitution, which gave Congress primary responsibility for writing the laws, while the executive enforced them. Lincoln, Secretary of Treasury Chase, contributed to the drafting and passage of some legislation, but congressional leaders played the dominant role in formulating domestic policy outside of military affairs, which has to come to a vote, baby. Throughout his presidency, Old Abe, he vetoed only 4 bills passed by Congress. The only important one, the Wade Davis bill. I'm going to have to step in, guys. I'm sorry. This is just bad.
And he only did the Wade Davis one because it went against what he was preaching.
He's like, you guys brought me some stupid shit before, but this is by far
retarded. The 37th Congress, which met from 1861 to 1863, they passed 428 public acts, more than double the number of the 27th Congress, which had previously held the record for most acts passed. 38th Congress, meeting from 63 to 65, they passed 411. And many of these bills were designed to raise revenue for funding the war, as federal expenses obviously increased 7-fold in the first year since the war.
Now it's in like the thousands. Insane. Take a look at the old fiscal and monetary policy. After the Battle of Fort Sumter, I know nobody wants to hear about financial shit, buddies, but you got to do it. After the Battle of Fort Sumter, Lincoln, Secretary of Treasury Salmon Chase, they faced the challenge of funding the war. Congress quickly approved Lincoln's request to assemble a 500,000-man army, but initially resisted raising taxes. After the Union defeat, the Battle of Bull Run, Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1861, which imposed the first federal income tax in the United States. It's only temporary, guys. Only temporary. The act was created as a flat tax of 3% on incomes above $800, which is $27,000 in current.
I would assume most people would not have been affected by that.
Yeah, this taxation of income reflected the increasing amount of wealth held in stocks and bonds rather than property, which the federal government had taxed in the past. As the average urban worker made approximately $600 per year, the income tax burden fell primarily on the rich and the famous.
Lincoln, he also signed the second and third Morrill tariffs, the first having become a law in the final months of Buchanan's tenure.
Okay.
These tariffs acts raised important duties considerably compared to previous tariff rates, and they were designed to both raise revenue and protect domestic manufacturing against foreign competition.
We'll take it.
During the war, the tariff also helped manufacturers offset the burden of new taxes. Compared to pre-war levels, the tariff would remain relatively high for the remainder of the 19th century.
Throughout this very Civil War, members of the Congress would debate many times on whether to raise further revenue primarily through increased tariff, which most strongly affected rural areas in the West, or they could increase income taxes, or which would most strongly affect a wealthier individuals in the Northeast.
And I'm guessing those wealthier individuals didn't like that.
No, they're mad. The revenue measures of 1861 proved inadequate for the funding of the war, forcing Congress to pass further bills designed to generate revenue. It's like, how can we take more money from everybody? February 1862, the old Congress, they passed the Legal Tender Act, which authorized the minting of $150 million of greenbacks. And, ladies and gentlemen, money as we know it.
Well, greenbacks were the first banknotes issued by the federal government of the United States since the end of the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. Greenbacks, they weren't backed by gold or silver, but rather by the promise of the United States government to honor their value.
Right. I mean, I got it. Trust me, man. Trust me, bro.
By the end of the war, 450 million worth of greenbacks were in circulation. 450 million in 1865.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1865, when money became worthless. We were just passing around pieces of paper saying, here, this is worth something, instead of actual gold or coins. Wow.
It's equivalent to 825 million right now.
Right. Okay.
I thought it would be more than that. Over $1 trillion or $1 billion. I mean, Congress also passed the Revenue Act of 1862, which established an excise tax that affected nearly every commodity, as well as the first national inheritance tax. So even if you're getting inheritance, that shit's getting taxed, dude. That's crazy.
Man. Crazy.
And they're like, you know what? Let's put tax back on tea.
Right. The Revenue Act of 1862 also added a progressive taxation structure to the federal income tax, implementing a tax of 5% on incomes above $10,000, which is fair. To collect these taxes, Congress created the Office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue within the Treasury Department. Despite these new measures, funding the war continued to be very difficult for Chase and Lincoln. They're like, it ain't working. The government continued to issue greenbacks and borrow large amounts of money. And the United States national
very
debt.
beginnings of debt, dude.
Their debt grew from $65 million in 1860 to $2 billion in 1866. That is insane. More than tripled.
Well, another Revenue Act was passed by Congress, this time the Act of 1864, which represented a compromise between those who favored a more progressive tax structure and those who favored a flat tax. The act established a 5% tax on incomes greater than $600, 10% on above $10,000, and raised taxes on businesses. Early 1865, Congress passed another tax increase, levying a tax of 10% on incomes above $5,000. By the end of the war, the income tax constituted about 1/5 of the revenue of the federal government. Wow. The federal inheritance tax would remain in effect until its repeal in 1870, while the federal income tax would be repealed in 1872. But don't worry, guys, it's going to come back because there's a world war right around the corner.
And it stayed.
Right.
Lincoln also took action against rampant fraud during the Civil War. He enacted the False Claims Act in 1863. This law, also known as the Lincoln Law, made it possible for private citizens to file false claims lawsuits on behalf of the United States government, and also protect the United States government from contractors providing faulty goods to the Union Army. What?
Oh, look at that.
Made it possible for private citizens to file false
sketchy
claims.
little businesses are selling supplies to the Army, probably janky ass shit, just so can get money?
Right.
That's crazy, too. Yeah. So the whole new, that's a whole something some people don't even think about. Like, you still got to get government contracts to get this shit made for the troops.
Well, during this time, any person who submitted a false claim would have to pay double the amount of the government's damage plus $2,000 per false claim.
Damn.
Nice.
This act has been amended several times, with a notable amendment being made in 1986 when Congress strengthened the law, and it still remains a model of a successful whistleblower law that works to deter contractors from defrauding the government.
Nice.
God forbid you defraud the government, but everybody else can get defrauded by the government.
Right.
Hoping to stabilize the currency, Chase convinced Congress to pass the National Banking Act in February of 1863, as well as the second one in 1864. Those acts established the office of the Comptroller of the Currency to oversee national banks, which would be subject to federal rather than state regulation.
There we go. In return for investing a third of their capital in federal bonds, these national banks were authorized to issue federal banknotes.
Yep.
After Congress imposed a tax on private banknotes in March of 1865, federal banknotes would become the dominant form of paper currency in the United States of America. Look at that. Paper.
Let's take a look at some reforms during his presidency. Many of the bills passed by the 37th and 38th Congress were designed, at least in part, to pay for the war. But other bills instituted long-term reforms in areas that were unrelated to revenue. Congress, they passed the Homestead Act in 1862, making millions of acres of government-held land in the West available for purchase at a very low cost.
Damn right.
Yeah. Under the act, settlers were to be granted 160 acres of public land if they invested 5 years in developing. So all you had to do is plot your claim and say, I'm going to farm it for 5 years, and then it's mine.
Right. Better get that shit done. Yeah. The Morrow Land Grant Colleges Act, also enacted 1862, provided government grants for agricultural colleges in each state.
MSU.
Yeah. The law gave member of the Congress 30,000 acres of public land to sell, with proceeds funding
Each member.
Right. With proceeds funding the establishment of the land grant colleges. Another 1862 law created the Department of Agriculture. That's a good one. To aid farming in the United States. The Pacific Railway Act of 1862 and also of 1864 granted federal support for the construction of the United States' first transcontinental railroad, which was completed in 1869. Mm-hmm. Choo-choo, mother.
June of 1864, Lincoln approved the Yosemite Grant enacted by Congress, which provided unprecedented federal protection for the area now known as Yosemite National Park. Lincoln is also largely responsible for the institution of Thanksgiving. He declared the final Thursday in November of 1863 to be the day of Thanksgiving.
Nice.
Before his presidency, Thanksgiving, while a regional holiday in New England since the 17th century, it had been proclaimed by the federal government only sporadically and on irregular dates.
Right.
So whenever we can feel like
Every once in a while, when they felt good that year. You know what?
Let's do some Thanksgiving this year, guys.
Yeah. Take a look at the domestic dissent and the Confederate sympathizers.
How he handled that, huh?
In the aftermath of the attack on Fort Sumter, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and began to imprison suspected Confederate sympathizers. 1861, Seward set up a special office in the State Department designed to monitor internal security. And the old federal government and the local popos, they worked together to suppress those suspected of actively supporting the old Confederacy. Like, you really want to kick them out, right? Take them to the border.
Hell no, then you give them more people.
Right. Among those in prison was old John Merryman, an officer of the Maryland militia who had cut telegraph lines leading to Washington.
In his subsequent case.
I think that was worth being in jail, right? If you're
I guess.
cutting down telegraph lines.
Well, in his subsequent case, Chief Justice Taney asserted that only Congress had the right to suspend habeas corpus. In a message to Congress delivered July 1861, Lincoln responded by arguing that his actions had been constitutional and necessary given the threat posed by the Confederacy. Congress, they later passed the Habeas Corpus Suspension Act of 1863, which provided congressional authorization to the president to suspend it and place limits on the administration's ability to indefinitely hold prisoners, though.
Oh, wow. The war continued on, lives lost, money spent. Many in the North came to resist the sacrifices required by the war, and recruiting declined. After state and local efforts failed.
You don't want to see voluntary recruiting decline because you know what that leads to, and that's not good.
After state and local efforts failed to furnish the troops necessary for the war, Congress, guess what? They don't want to come willingly. We're going to make them. They passed the draft March 1863. It was the Enrollment Act. The Conscription Act included various exemptions and allowed potential draftees to pay for substitutes.
So they could pay for some other poor young man to go instead. Well,
I want Rebecca. Well, you know what to do, son.
Right. That's great.
John Boy, you have been drafted. Actually, you have been substituted. But is nonetheless proved unpopular in many
the other
communities.
guy that's paid to have him substitute, he gets the money for being in like the army and shit,
Right.
not the guy that's there.
Right.
That's fucked.
Well, he's a slave.
Pretty much.
Wow. But nonetheless, it proved unpopular in many communities and among many state and local leaders.
Of course it did.
They're like, this is crazy. What are we doing here?
Well, opposition to the draft was especially strong among Irish Americans, urban laborers, and others who obviously could not afford to pay for substitutes. Which we've mentioned numerous times. The New York City draft riots of July 1863 saw mobs attack soldiers, policemen, and African Americans, and was only subdued after Lincoln diverted soldiers from the Gettysburg campaign. Yeah, did we? I think we briefly talked about that. We'll probably have an episode on that as well.
Right.
Rejecting calls to institute martial law into the city, Lincoln appointed John Adams Dix to oversee New York City, and Dix allowed the city to hold civilian trials on those who had participated in the riot. Oh shit, J6, baby.
Civilian trials, huh? Clement Vallandigham, Copperhead Democrat from Ohio. He emerged as the most prominent critics of the war. General Ambrose Burnside arrested him in May of 1863 after the latter strongly criticized the draft and other wartime policies. Well, you can't arrest him.
Yeah, you can.
Just for saying it.
Yeah, you can.
A military commission subsequently sentenced, Vallandigham to prison.
So we're going to put you behind bars. You're not spewing shit until this war's over.
You're crazy, bud. But Lincoln said, you know what? No, we're going to release him, but we're going to put him down south so he can spew shit down there.
He wants to be with those guys. Let him be with them.
Ohio Democrats nonetheless nominated Vallandigham for the governor in June of 1863.
Oh, jeez.
He got defeated, though, in 1863, along with Democratic electoral defeats elsewhere in 1863. This represented a major victory for Lincoln and the Republicans as it signified public support for the war. I don't know about for the war, but...
All right. Well, let's take a short look at his dealings with the Native Americans and the conflicts there.
Yeah, you guys forgot about that. We're still dealing with those fuckers.
All right. Well, conflicts with them on the American frontier continued during the Civil War, as we know, as American settlers continued to push west. 1862, Lincoln sent General Pope to put down the Sioux Uprising in Minnesota. Presented with 303 execution warrants for convicted Santee Dakota who were accused of killing innocent farmers. Execution warrant. Lincoln conducted his own personal review of each of these warrants, eventually approving 39 of them for execution. Then his final two annual messages to Congress, Lincoln called for reform of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and federal Indian policy. However, as the world began to turn, continued to turn.
As the world turns.
And as the war to preserve the Union was Lincoln's primary concern, he simply allowed the system to function unchanged for the balance of his presidency. Said, you know what? One thing at a time, we'll deal with these bastards later.
Hold on, you guys. Hold on, man.
We'll send Custer up there. Don't worry.
Right. Look at this. We lose some states, and the Union gained some states. Well, the Union had two states that were admitted to the Union while Lincoln was in office. The first, West Virginia.
Yep.
1861 Wheeling Convention, delegates from several counties in Western Virginia. They formed the restored government of Virginia as the legitimate government of Virginia. That's what they're trying to say. In the following year, the people of West Virginia voted to secede from Virginia, and a new state constitution was
But the
written.
Union has no problem with secession when it benefits them, though, do they?
Exactly. Despite the opposition of some cabinet members who believed that the partition of Virginia posed constitutional issues, Lincoln supported the actions of West Virginia Unionists, and he signed a bill that admitting West Virginia as a state. West Virginia was admitted to the Union 20th of June, 1863. Later, through its ruling in 1871 case of Virginia versus West Virginia, the Supreme Court implicitly affirmed that the breakaway was legal. Oh, no, they didn't.
Oh, they did have the consents necessary.
Right, so it was legal. I mean, hey, they did it all by the law.
They voted,
boys.
buddies.
They didn't do it like you guys did.
Right. The second state admitted to the Union while Lincoln was president was Nevada. Congress approved an enabling act authorizing Nevada Territory to form a state government in March 1864. Similar legislation was also approved for Colorado Territory and Nebraska Territory.
Fantastic.
Nebraska's Constitutional Convention voted against statehood, while voters in Colorado rejected the proposed state constitution. So, of those three, only Nevada became a state during Lincoln's presidency.
Hey, man, gotta crawl.
Which happened Halloween, 1864.
Oh, look at that. Take a look at the old foreign policy. Lincoln named his main political rival, William Seward, as Secretary of State. Left most diplomatic issues in his portfolio.
He said, you take care of it.
Right.
You be the border czar.
However, Lincoln did select some of the top diplomats as part of his patronage policy. He also closely watched the handling of the Trent Affair in late 1861. He just wanted to make sure that there was no escalation into war with Britain. Like, we can't afford war with Britain, buddy.
There was an incident in 1861 during the war that threatened a war between them.
Right.
The Navy captured two Confederate... Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, can't do that. That's the last thing you want to fight with the old redcoats.
We'll probably have we'll have an episode on that.
Yeah.
See, there's so much stuff to do,
So
man.
much stuff. Seward's main role was to keep Britain and France from supporting the Confederacy. He was successful after indicating to London and Paris that Washington would declare war on them if they supported Richmond. Wow.
Well, the U.S. and the CSA, they both recognized the vital importance of foreign powers, clearly.
Damn right.
As a European intervention could greatly aid the Confederate cause, much as French intervention in the American Revolutionary War had helped the United States gain its independence.
It did. Without France, I don't know.
Right. At the start of the war, Russia was the lone great power to support the Union, while the other European powers had varying degrees of sympathy for the Confederacy.
They did.
Because Great Britain wanted to see the U.S. say,
Right.
they're like, see, it ain't so fun when the people sent against you, is it?
See you back.
Washington's policy was a success. All foreign nations were officially neutral throughout the Civil War, and none recognized the Confederates. They were close to until
very close.
Up until like literally Gettysburg.
Yes,
dude.
and they're like, all right, let's see what's going on here, because it intrigued them. They're like, oh wait, these guys are actually putting up a fight,
and they knew cotton was big business.
Damn right. Although these countries remained out of the war, the European powers, especially France and Britain, they factored into the American Civil War in various other ways. European leaders saw the division of U.S. and they were
right.
Yeah, they're like, we can possibly eliminate these guys now, or at least weaken them.
Because they're growing.
Right, they're growing. They looked for ways to exploit the inability of the U.S. to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. Spain invaded the Dominican Republic. They're like, yes, they did that in 1861, while France established a puppet regime in Mexico. France did too.
Right, it's the one that opposes the European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere, so that means Mexico and Dominican Republic.
Right, look at that shit.
However, many in Europe also hoped for a quick end to the war, for both humanitarian purposes and due to the economic disruption caused.
See, there are some good people out there. They don't even live over here. They're worried about our people and our land.
They're worried about them and their money. That's about it. Lincoln's foreign policy was deficient. Lincoln's foreign policy was deficient in 1861 in terms of appealing to European public opinion. The European aristocracy was absolutely gleeful in pronouncing the American debacle as proof that the entire experiment in popular government had failed. Oh, dude, they're like,
well, that's fantastic.
Oh, popular government.
Right.
Yeah. But they just wanted the Americans to fail, like I said.
Right. Diplomats said they had to explain that the U.S. was not committed to ending slavery, and instead they repeated legalistic arguments about the unconstitutionality of the succession. They're like, Confederate spokesmen, on the other hand, they were much more successful by ignoring slavery and instead focusing on their struggle for liberty, their commitment to free trade, and the essential role of cotton in European economy. Like, hey. However, the Confederacy's hope that cotton exports would compel European interference did not come to fruition. Britain found alternative sources of cotton and experienced economic growth in industries that did not rely on cotton. They did too.
They're like, damn, so it's helping out everybody.
It did.
Well, though the issuance of an Emancipation Proclamation did not immediately end the possibility of European intervention, it rallied European public opinion
And the Union, yeah.
To the Union by adding abolition as a Union war goal.
Nice.
Any chance of European intervention in the war ended with the victories, like I said, at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, as European leaders came to believe that the Confederates, they're done.
That's like everybody's seen it. I mean,
they done.
Let's take a look at old Britain.
Like, we don't back losers.
Right. Let's take a look at the losing Britain side, huh? Elite opinion in Britain tended to favor the Confederacy, as we said, but public opinion tended to favor the U.S.
Yeah, because one has interests in the other, obviously.
Large-scale trade continued in both directions with the United States, with the Americans shipping grain to Britain, while Britain exported manufactured items and munitions. The British trade with the Confederacy was limited, with a trickle of cotton going to Britain and hundreds of thousands of munitions slipped in by numerous small blockade runners.
Damn.
The British textile industry depended on cotton from the South, but it had stocks to keep the mills operating for a year. In any case, the industrialists and workers carried little weight in British politics. With the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation of September 1862, the Civil War became a war against slavery that most British supported.
Yeah. A serious diplomatic dispute between the U.S. and Great Britain arose in late 1861. Yeah, they had a problem with the Trent Affair. That was about the extent of that. We'll have an episode on that.
Well, that's France.
Well, let's take a look at France. Emperor Napoleon III. They're still doing Napoleons, huh? Yeah. He sought to reestablish a French empire in North America. Jeez. With Mexico at the center of an empire that he hoped would eventually include a canal across Central America.
It did, though.
December 1861, France invaded Mexico. Damn, they took advantage, huh?
Did.
While the official justification was the collection of debt, France eventually established a puppet state under the rule of Maximilian I of Mexico.
They did.
October 1862, fearing that a reunified United States would threaten his restored French empire, Napoleon III he proposed an armistice and joint mediation of the American Civil War by France, Britain, and Russia. He was like, let's ensure that the South be's the South still.
What are you guys doing down there in Mexico? Oh, no, that's nothing, man.
We also helped the Confederates because they were sneaking cotton through the Mexican border.
It's true. Right. However, this proposal was declined by other European powers who feared alienating the North.
They know where their industrial and the money was coming from.
Right. Napoleon's stance towards Russia in the 1863 January uprising divided the powers and greatly diminished any chance of a joint European intervention. The OUS, they refused to recognize Maximilian's government and threatened to drive France out of the country by force. But it did not become directly involved in conflict, even as Mexican resistance to Maximilian's rule grew. With the end of the American Civil War in 1865, the United States increased pressure on France to get the hell out of Mexico and go back to where you came from, you sons of bitches. In 1866, France withdrew its forces from Mexico, and Maximilian was captured by Republican forces and murdered in 1867.
He sure was. And a little lead into our next week's episode. Everybody knows shortly after 10 p.m., Good Friday, April 14th, 1865, Lincoln assassinated while attending a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater with his wife and 2 guests.
He did not rise 3 days later.
He did not. Lincoln was shot in the back of his head by John Wilkes Booth. The mortally wounded president was immediately examined by a doctor in the audience and then carried across the street to Peterson's boarding house, where he succumbed to his wounds at 7:22 a.m. the following morning.
On the 15th of April.
That's a nice little teaser. It doesn't have to be a teaser. Everybody knows the Lincoln assassination, but that's going to lead us into next week's episode. We're going to cover it from the front to back. A nice little profile on John Wilkes Booth and the aftermath, including people only talk about John Wilkes Booth, but there's other people that literally got executed for the plot in this to assassinate Lincoln. So one of them was a woman hung in public. Hung in public in New York Square, or the right in front of the Capitol, pretty much.
This was insane.
So we'll get to that next week. And yeah, we got nothing else to say. This is like an hour and a half at least long, so we'll leave you there and make sure you're subscribing, doing all that good stuff. We'll see you next week for more Battles of the American Civil War. Behind the war, we are behind the battles. We're out of Michigan this week.
Bang dang, I guess. Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Hey, here we go. We made it. The end of the Abraham Lincoln saga, story, legend, whatever you want to call it. Either or, we're going to call it the end, because we have arrived at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. We're going to lead, obviously you guys know what already happened, and if you listen to the last episode, we covered his presidency, basically all throughout the end of the war, his re-election, and the kind of the lead up to this. We're not going to get into John Wilkes Booth, a lot of his early story, obviously, because it'll be way too long of an episode. So we'll kind of just go into the lead up, the situation, the atmosphere after kind of the war's over now, and what led up for old Johnny Wilkes to decide this. Then we'll take a look at some conspirators in this.
Because there's always some of those.
And one of the only women hanged in this time of the nation in front of everybody. So we'll have all that on the assassination. We all know, shot by John Wilkes Booth while attending the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater, April 14th, 1865. Lincoln, he died of his wounds the following day, 7:22 a.m. in the Peterson house, which was across the street from the theater. He obviously was the first U.S. president to be assassinated, which is crazy. The first 3 presidents to ever be assassinated all happened within 50 before 1800 or 1900, and then nothing until JFK. John Wilkes Booth, he was born in Maryland into a family of prominent stage actors. He had, by the time of this assassination, became a famous actor and national celebrity in his own right. He was also an outspoken Confederate sympathizer. In late 1860, he was initiated in the pro-Confederate Knights of the Golden Circle in Baltimore, Maryland.
In May of 1863, the Confederate States Congress passed a law prohibiting the exchange of black soldiers, following a previous decree by President Jefferson Davis in December of 1862, that neither black soldiers nor their white officers would be exchanged.
Damn.
This became a reality in mid-July 1863, after some soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts were not exchanged following their assault on Fort Wagner, which they got their asses handed to them. Oh, poor guy. July 30th, 1863, President Abe Lincoln, he issued General Order number 252. That was to stop prisoner exchanges with the South until all Northern soldiers would be exchanged without regard for their skin
Yeah,
color.
said you don't want to do it all, then you ain't getting none of your guys back either. And trust me, we're taking way more than yours.
Right.
Stopping the prisoner exchanges is often wrongly attributed to General Grant, even though he was commanding an army in the West in mid-1863 and obviously became overall commander in early 64. Booth, he then conceived a plan to kidnap Lincoln in order to blackmail the Union into resuming prisoner exchanges, and he recruited Samuel Arnold, George Atzerodt, David Harold, Michael O'Laughlin, Lewis Powell, also known as Lewis Payne, and John Surratt to help him. Surratt's mother, Mary, left her tavern in Surrattsville, Maryland, and moved to a house in Washington, D.C., where Booth became a frequent visitor.
Booth and Lincoln, not personally acquainted, but Lincoln had seen Booth at Ford's Theater in 1863. After the assassination, actor Frank Mordaunt, he wrote that Lincoln, who was apparently harbored no suspicions about Booth, he admired the actor and had reputedly but unsuccessfully invited him to the White House. Booth attended Lincoln's second inauguration on 4th of March, 1865, writing in his diary afterwards, "What an excellent chance I had, if I wished, to kill the president on Inauguration Day." Wow.
All right, well, criminal, just write down your crime. Or thinking about crime.
Right.
March 17th, Booth and the other conspirators planned to abduct Lincoln as he returned from a play at Campbell General Hospital in Northwest Washington. Lincoln did not go to the play, however, instead attending a ceremony at the National Hotel. Booth, who was living at the National Hotel at the time, and had he not gone to the hospital for the abortive kidnap attempt, might have been able to attack Lincoln at the hotel. Right. Well, meanwhile, the Confederacy was collapsing. April 3rd, Richmond, the Confederate capital, fell to the Union Army.
Yeah, it's pretty much all but done. 9th of April, Robert E. Lee, as we all know, he surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Confederate President Jefferson Davis and other Confederate officials, they fled. Nevertheless, Booth continued to believe in the old rebel cause and sought a way to salvage it. He soon decided, you know what? Let's kill this lanky son of a bitch.
What would that have done?
Right. There are various theories about Booth's motivations. In a letter to his mother, he wrote of his desire to avenge the South.
I mean, I could see that.
Right.
I couldn't see a reason he believed that killing Lincoln would revive the South and make it,
Never happened.
Right. Well, Doris Kearns Goodwin has endorsed the idea. Another factor may have been Booth's rivalry with his well-known older brother, actor.
Maybe he did think that because the vice president was a war Democrat.
All through the war, supported the Union.
It's true.
There's another idea out there that Booth's rivalry with his well-known older brother, actor Edwin Booth, who was a loyal Unionist. Oh, so you want to get back at his older brother.
Oh.
Some historians disagree with this cause, saying that he actually admired the daring exploits of abolitionist John Brown.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Booth's sister, Asia Booth Clark, quoted him as saying, "John Brown was a man inspired, the grandest character of the century."
Okay. Maybe he just liked that he stood up what he believed in, right?
Maybe.
April 11th, Booth attended Lincoln's last speech, in which Lincoln promoted voting rights for emancipated slaves. Booth said, "That means N-word citizenship. That is the last speech he will ever give." Enraged, Booth urged Powell to shoot Lincoln on that very spot. Whether Booth made his request because he was not armed or considered Powell a better shot than himself, we have no idea. In any event, Powell refused for fear of the crowd, and Booth was either unable or unwilling to personally attempt to kill the president at that time. However, old John Wilkes, he said to David Harold, "By God, I'll put him through."
Uh-oh. According to Ward Hill Lamont, 3 days before his death, Lincoln related a dream, like we said in the first episode, I believe,
Right.
in which he wandered the White House searching for the source of mournful sounds.
Wow.
He said, "I kept on until I arrived at the East Room, which I entered. There I met with a sickening surprise. Before me was a catafalque on which rested a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments.
Wow.
Around it were stationed soldiers who were acting as guards, and there was a throng of people, gazing mournfully upon the corpse, whose face was covered, others weeping pitifully. 'Who is dead in the White House?' I demanded one of the soldiers. 'The president,' was his answer. 'He was killed by an assassin.'"
Damn. Can you imagine that, dude?
That's crazy.
However, Lincoln later told Lamon that in this dream it was not me, but some other fellow that was killed. Seems that this ghostly assassin tried his hand on someone else. For months, Lincoln had looked pale and haggard, but on the morning of assassination, he told people how happy he was. First Lady Mary Lincoln, she felt that such talk could bring bad luck.
Well, because she's already
Right.
freaking depressed shell of herself right now, mourning her kid.
Don't you smile over here, Abe. Lincoln told his cabinet that he had dreamed of being on a singular and indescribable vessel that was moving with great rapidity toward a dark and indefinite shore, and that he had the same dream before nearly every great and important event of the war, such as Union victories at Antietam, Murfreesboro, and Gettysburg, and Vicksburg. Oh, so he thought, this is a good thing. I've had this dream before, and good things happen.
Every time something good.
All right.
Besides, the thousands of men dying, but April 14th, Booth's mourning started at midnight.
Okay.
He wrote his mother that all was well, but he was in haste. In his diary, he wrote that our cause being almost lost, something decisive and great must be done.
All right.
While visiting Ford's Theater around noon to pick up his mail, Booth learned that Lincoln and Grant were to visit the theater that evening for a performance of Our American Cousin. This provided him with an especially good opportunity to attack Lincoln, since having performed there several times, he knew the theater's layout and was familiar to its staff.
Right.
Why they wouldn't question why he's there.
Not at all. Booth went to Mary Surratt's boarding house in Washington, D.C. and asked her to deliver a package to her tavern in Surrattsville, Maryland. He also asked her to tell her tenant, Louis Weichman, to ready the guns and have that ammo ready that Booth had previously stored at the tavern.
Uh-oh.
The conspirators met for the final time at 8:45 p.m. Booth assigned Powell to kill Secretary of State William H. Seward at his home. Atterad to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at Kirkwood Hotel. And he told Harold to guide Powell, who was unfamiliar with Washington, to Seward's house and then to rendezvous with Booth in Maryland. Uh-oh. Yeah. Damn, they're just going after everybody. Surprised they're killing Andrew Johnson, I guess.
Booth was the only well-known member of the conspiracy, clearly. Access to the theater's upper floor containing the presidential box was restricted, which it should be, and Booth was the only plotter who could have realistically expected to be admitted there without difficulty.
Right.
Furthermore, it would have been reasonable but ultimately incorrect for the plotters to have assumed that the entrance of the box would be guarded. Right, yeah, didn't even have guards.
Right. And plus, if anybody were to ask him, like, dude, Abe's been begging me to come to the White House. I bet if you ask him to let me come in there.
Well, I'm sure it's just not a straight shot up into that thing. It's probably a hallway with several booths.
Right. And with John's.
Well, had it been guarded, Booth would have been the only plotter with a plausible chance of gaining access to the president.
Right.
Or at least to gain entry to the box without being searched for weapons first. Booth planned to shoot Lincoln at point-blank range with a single-shot Philadelphia Derringer pistol and then stab Grant at the theater.
Damn.
They were all to strike simultaneously shortly after 10 o'clock. Surratt, he tried to withdraw from the plot, which to this point had involved only kidnapping, not murder, but Booth pressured him to continue.
Ooh.
And then he gets drunk.
Despite what Booth had heard earlier in the day, General Grant and his wife, Julia, had declined to accompany the Lincolns, as Mary Lincoln and Julia Grant were not on good terms. She's like, dude, my wife think your wife is fucking nuts.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, but...
The one time wife spats actually turned out good for one party anyways.
All right. Others in succession also declined Lincoln's invitation until finally Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris, daughter of United States Senator Ira Harris of New York, they're like, we'll go. William H. Crook, one of Lincoln's bodyguards, advised him, like, please, Abe, don't go. But Lincoln said he had promised his wife.
Oh, geez.
Lincoln told Speaker of the House, Schuyler Colfax, I suppose it's time to go, though I would rather stay, before assisting Mary into the carriage.
Jeez.
Damn, everything just saying, point to that thing, just don't go.
Listen to your gut, man. Listen to your heart. The presidential party arrived late and settled into the box, made from two adjoining boxes with the divide and partition removed.
Okay.
The play was interrupted, and the orchestra played Hail to the Chief as the full house of about 1,700 rose in applause.
Fantastic.
Lincoln sat in a rocking chair that had been selected for him from among the Ford family's personal furnishings.
It's fucking great. Look at this guy.
I've seen that rocking chair in person, by the way.
Crazy. The cast modified a line of the play in honor of Lincoln. When the heroine asked for a seat protected from the draft, the reply scripted as, well, you're not the only one that wants to escape the draft. It was delivered instead as, the draft has already been stopped by order of the president. A member of the audience observed that Mary Lincoln often called her husband's attention to aspects of the action on stage and seemed to take a great pleasure in witnessing his enjoyments. It was like a little, she ain't even looking at the stage. She's looking at old Abe, just smiling away.
Looking out
the little boys' booties.
At one point, Mary whispered to Lincoln, who was holding her hand, "What will Miss Harris think of my hanging on to you so?" Oh. Lincoln replied, "She won't think anything about it."
Why would she?
Because you're not supposed to
Right.
do public display of affection. In the following years, these words were traditionally considered Lincoln's last, though N.W. Minor, a family friend, claimed in 1882 that Mary Lincoln told him that Lincoln's last words expressed a wish to visit Jerusalem.
Oh. Lincoln's usual protections were not in place this very night. Crook, he was on his second shift at the White House, and Ward Hill Layman, Lincoln's personal bodyguard, he was in Richmond on assignment from Lincoln. John Frederick Parker, he was assigned to guard the presidential box. Intermission, he went to a nearby tavern along with Lincoln's valet, Charles Forbes, and coachman Francis Burke. We're just going to go get a drink right quick. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Booth had several drinks while waiting for his planned time. It is unclear whether Parker returned to the theater, but he was certainly not at his post when Booth entered the box. Damn.
In any event, there's no certainty that the entry would have been denied to a celebrity such as Booth.
Right, as we always said.
Booth had prepared a brace to bar the door after entering the box, indicating that he expected a guard. After spending time at the tavern, Booth entered Ford's Theater one last time at about 10:10 p.m., this time through the theater's front entrance. He passed through the dress circle and went to the door that led to the presidential box after showing Charles Forbes his calling card. Come on through, buddy.
Navy surgeon George Brainerd Todd saw Booth arrive. About 10:25 p.m., a man came in, walked slowly along the side on which the president box was, and I heard a man say, "There's Booth," and I turned my head to look at him. He was still walking very slow and was near the box door when he stopped. He took a card from his pocket, wrote something on it, and gave it to the usher who took it to the box. In a minute, the door was open, and he walked in. I bet he took that card to Lincoln.
Might have, right? Said, John Wilkes Booth wishes to see you or something.
Abe's like, "No shit."
About time. Well, once inside the hallway, Booth barricaded the door by wedging a stick between it and the wall. From here, a second door led to Lincoln's box. Evidence shows that earlier in the day, Booth had bored a peephole in this second door.
Wow.
Nobody noticed. Booth knew the play Our American Cousin and waited to time his shot at about 10:15 p.m. with the laughter at one of the hilarious lines of the play delivered by actor Harry Hawk. It goes, "Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal, you shocked-alizing old man tramp." Right. Lincoln was laughing at this line when Booth opened the door, stepped forward, and shot him from behind with his pistol.
At least he was laughing.
I guess.
The bullet entered Lincoln's skull behind his left ear, passed through his brain, came to rest near the front of skull after fracturing both orbital plates.
Damn, blew out his face.
Lincoln slumped over in his chair and then fell backward. Rathbone turned to see Booth standing in gun smoke less than 4 feet behind Lincoln. Booth shouted a word that Rathbone thought sounded like "freedom!"
Rathbone jumped from his seat and struggled with Booth, who dropped the pistol and drew a dagger, with which he stabbed Rathbone in the left forearm.
Damn.
Rathbone again grabbed at Booth as he prepared to jump from the box to the stage, which was a 12-foot drop. Booth's riding spur became entangled on the Treasury flag decorating the box, and he landed awkwardly on his left foot.
Ooh.
As he began crossing the stage, many in the audience thought he was part of the play.
Right. Damn. Booth, he then held his bloody knife over his head and yelled something to the audience. What is traditionally held that Booth shouted the Virginia state motto, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. Either from the box or the stage, witness accounts, but they don't know which happened where. Most recalled hearing "Sic semper tyrannis," but others, including Booth himself, said he yelled only "Sic semper."
Thus always, maybe? Right.
Thus always. Some did not recall Booth saying anything in Latin. There's similar uncertainty about what Booth shouted next in English. Either "the South is avenged," or "revenge for the South," or "the South shall be free." Two witnesses remember Booth's words as, "I've done it."
They did something. Immediately after Booth landed on the stage, Major Joseph B. Stewart climbed over the orchestra pit and footlights and pursued Booth across the stage. The screams of Mary Lincoln and Clara Harris and Rathbone's cries of "Stop that man" prompted others to join the chase as pandemonium broke out.
Damn.
Booth exited the theater through a side door and on the way, stabbing orchestra leader William Withers Jr.
For what? He probably tried stopping him.
Maybe. As he leapt into the saddle of his getaway horse, Booth pushed away Joseph Burroughs, who had been holding the horse, striking Burroughs with the handle of his knife.
Damn. This dude he's got to go.
Get out of here.
Charles Leal, a young Union Army surgeon, pushed through the crowd to the door of the presidential box. Couldn't open it until Rathbone inside noticed that there was a wooden brace, so he removed it and let old Charles in. Charles, he found that Lincoln seated with his head leaning to his right as Mary held him and sobbed. His eyes were closed, and he was in profoundly comatose condition, while his breathing was intermittent and exceedingly stertorous. Thinking Lincoln had been stabbed, Charles, he shifted him to the floor. Meanwhile, another physician, another Charles Sabin Taft, he lifted into the box from the stage.
Jeez.
Damn, that lifted his ass. Must have been a little skinny guy.
Well, after Leal and bystander William Kent cut away Lincoln's collar while unbuttoning his coat and shirt and found no stab wound, Leal located the gunshot wound behind the left ear. You couldn't see the blood. He found the bullet too deep to be removed, but dislodged a blood clot, after which Lincoln's breathing improved.
Right.
He learned that regularly removing new clots maintained Lincoln's breathing. After giving Lincoln artificial respiration, Leo allowed actress Laura Keene to cradle the president's head in her lap. He pronounced the wound mortal.
Yeah, it's like, this is rough. Damn.
Let's get him to comfort at least.
All right. Leal, Taft, and another Dr. Albert King decided that Lincoln must be moved to the nearest house on 10th Street because a carriage ride to the White House was too dangerous. Carefully, 7 men picked up Lincoln and slowly carried him out of the theater, which was packed with an angry mob. After considering Peter Taudevil's Star Saloon next door, they concluded that they would take Lincoln to one of the houses across the way. It was raining as soldiers carried Lincoln into the street, where a man urged them toward the house of Taylor William Peterson. Peterson's first-floor bedroom, the exceptionally tall Lincoln, was laid diagonally on a small bed. Damn.
After clearing everyone out of the room, including Mrs. Lincoln, the doctors cut away Lincoln's clothes but discovered no other wounds. Finding that Lincoln was cold, they applied hot water bottles and mustard plasters while covering him with blankets. Later, more physicians arrived. Surgeon General Joseph Barnes, Charles Henry Crane, Anderson Ruffin Abbott, and Robert K. Stone, who was Lincoln's personal physician.
Damn it. Damn, all agreed Lincoln could not survive. Barnes probed the wound, locating the bullet and some bone fragments. Throughout the night, as the hemorrhage continued, they removed blood clots to relieve pressure on the brain. And Leal, he held the comatose president's hand with a firm grip to let him know that he was in touch with his humanity and had a friend, he said. Lincoln's older son, Robert Todd Lincoln, he arrived at about 11 p.m. But 12-year-old Tad Lincoln, he was watching a play of Aladdin at Grover's Theater when he learned of his father's assassination. He did not get to go there. They kept his little boy away.
Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton arrived. Stanton insisted that the sobbing Mrs. Lincoln leave the sick room. Then for the rest of the night, he essentially ran the United States government from the house, including directing the hunt for Booth and the other conspirators.
All right.
Guards kept the public away, but numerous officials and physicians were admitted to pay their respects.
Son of a bitch.
Initially, Lincoln's features were calm and his breathing slow and steady. Later, one of his eyes became swollen and the right side of his face discolored. Monsell Bradhurst Field wrote in a letter to the New York Times that Lincoln then started breathing regularly, but with effort, and did not seem to be struggling or suffering.
Okay, just chilling. As he neared death, old Abe, his appearance became perfectly natural, except for the discoloration around his eyes. Shortly before 7 a.m., Mary, she was allowed to return to Lincoln's side. And, as Dixon reported, she again seated herself by the president, kissing him and calling him every endearing name. Lincoln, dead, 7:22 a.m., April 15th, 1865. Mary Lincoln was not present at this time. Oh, that sucks. In his last moments, Lincoln's face became calm and his breathing quieter. Field, he wrote, there was no apparent suffering, no convulsive action, no rattling of the throat, only a mere cessation of breathing.
Damn. According to Lincoln's secretary, John Hay, at the moment of Lincoln's death, a look of unspeakable peace came upon his worn features. The assembly knelt for a prayer, after which Stanton said either, now he belongs to the ages, or now he belongs to the angels.
It's the angels, probably.
On Lincoln's death, Vice President Johnson became the 17th President of the United States. The oath of the office was administered to Johnson by Chief Justice Salmon Chase sometime between 10 and 11 a.m.
Hey, they got to do that shit quick, guys. Right. Booth assigned Lewis Powell to kill Secretary of State William Seward, as we said, on the night
this was supposed to all happen at the same time.
Seward was at his home on Lafayette Square, confined to bed and recovering from injuries sustained on the 5th of April from being thrown from his carriage. Harold, he guided Powell to Seward's house. Powell carried an 1858 Whitney revolver, which is a large, heavy, and popular gun during the Civil War. And he also had a Bowie knife.
Bowie.
Yeah. William Bell, Seward's maitre d', answered the door when Powell knocked at about 10:10 p.m. As Booth made his way to the presidential box at Ford's Theater at this very time, Powell, he told Bell that he had medicine from Seward's physician and that his instructions were to personally show Seward how to take it. Overcoming Bell's skepticism, Powell made his way up to the stairs to Seward's third-floor bedroom. At the top of the staircase, he was stopped by Seward's son, Assistant Secretary of State Frederick Seward, to whom he repeated the medicine story. And Frederick, suspicious, said, my dad's asleep. You can show him in the morning.
Hearing voices, Seward's daughter Fanny emerged from Seward's room and said, Fred, father is awake now.
Oh, no.
Jeez. Thus revealing to Powell where Seward was. Powell turned as if to start downstairs, but suddenly turned again and drew his revolver. He aimed at Frederick's forehead and pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired.
Oh, no.
So he bludgeoned Frederick unconscious with it. Bell, yelling, murder, murder, ran outside for help.
Son of a bitch.
Damn, dude.
Damn. Fanny opened the door again. Powell shoved past her to Seward's bed. He stabbed at Seward's face and neck, slicing open his cheek. However, the splint, often mistakenly described as a neck brace, that was on Seward's neck had fitted at Seward's broken jaw, prevented the blade from penetrating his jugular.
Lucky son of a gun.
Seward eventually recovered, though the serious scars on his face. Seward's son Augustus and Sergeant George Robinson, a soldier assigned to Seward, they were alerted by Fanny's screams and received stab wounds in struggling with Powell. Oh, man.
As Augustus went for a pistol, Powell ran downstairs towards the door, where he encountered Emmerich Hansel, who was a State Department messenger. Powell stabbed Hansel in the back, then ran outside exclaiming, I'm mad! I'm mad! Screams from the house had frightened Harold, who ran off, leaving Powell to find his own way in an unfamiliar city.
Holy shit. Jeez. What a mess right there.
Well, there's that, huh?
Booth, he had assigned George Atzerodt to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson. As we said, he was staying at the Kirkwood House in Washington. Atzerodt was to go to Johnson's room at 10:15 p.m. and shoot him dead. On the 14th of April, Atzerodt, he rented the room directly above Johnson's. The next day, he arrived there at the appointed time, and he carried a gun and a knife. Went to the bar downstairs. He asked the bartender about Johnson's character and behavior. He eventually became very drunk, and he wandered off through the streets, tossing his knife away at some point. The bartender was like, oh, he's such a nice man, and he'd rather that the South would just let him be, let him be down there. And he's like, really?
I could never see no man wishing harm on that guy. And he's like, shit.
Son of a bitch. He made his way to the Pennsylvania House Hotel by 2 a.m., where he obtained a room and he went to sleep. And he said, fuck that.
He had to have heard about the assassination.
Probably not.
All right, drunk as shit.
Right.
Well, earlier in the day, though, Booth had stopped by the Kirkwood House and left a note for Johnson. Don't wish to disturb you. Are you at home? J. Wilkes Booth.
Oh, wow.
One theory is that Booth was trying to find out whether Johnson was expected at the Kirkwood that night. Another holds that Booth, concerned that Atzerodt would fail to kill Johnson, intended the note to implicate Johnson in the conspiracy.
Okay. Wow. Abraham Lincoln was mourned in both the North and the South, and indeed around the whole world. Numerous foreign governments issued proclamations and declared periods of mourning on 15th April.
Word spread fast, huh? I guess the telegraph.
Lincoln was praised in sermons on Easter Sunday, which fell on the day after his death. 18th of April, 1865, mourners lined up 7 deep for a mile to view Lincoln in his walnut casket in the White House's black draped East Room. Special trains brought thousands from other cities, some of whom slept on the Capitol's lawn. Hundreds of thousands watched the funeral procession on April 19th, and millions more lined the 1,700-mile route of the train, which took Lincoln's remains through New York to Springfield, Illinois, often passing trackside tributes in the form of bands, bonfires, and hymn singing. Oh, my goodness.
Poet Walt Whitman composed When Lilacs Last and the Dooryard Bloomed, Oh Captain, My Captain, and 2 other poems to eulogize Lincoln.
Fantastic.
Ulysses S. Grant called Lincoln incontestably the greatest man I ever knew. You only met him twice.
Right.
Robert E. Lee expressed sadness. I'm sad.
Right.
Southern-born Elizabeth Blair said that those of Southern-born sympathies know now that they have lost a friend willing and more powerful to protect and serve them than they can now ever hope to find again.
Because he was the only one that was really like, hey, we can...
Yeah. African-American orator Frederick Douglass called the assassination an unspeakable calamity. British Foreign Secretary Lord Russell, he called Lincoln's death a sad calamity.
Either way. It was a calamity.
Yep.
China's Chief Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Prince Gong, described himself as inexpressibly shocked and startled. Ecuadorian President Gabriel Garcia Moreno, he said, "Never should I have thought that the noble country of Washington would be humiliated by such a black and horrible crime. Nor should I have ever thought that Mr. Lincoln would come to such a horrible end after having served his country with such wisdom and glory under so critical circumstances."
Oh, the Ecuadorian guy, huh?
Look at him. The government of Liberia issued a proclamation calling Lincoln not only the ruler of his own people, but a father to millions of a race stricken and oppressed. Wow. The government of Haiti condemned the assassination as a horrid crime. Well, it was horrid.
Within a half hour of fleeing Ford's Theater, though, we'll go back to there, Booth crossed the Navy Yard Bridge into Maryland. A Union Army sentry named Silas Cobb questioned him about his late-night travel. Booth, he said he was going home to the nearby town of Charles. Although it was forbidden for civilians to cross the bridge after 9 p.m., the sentry let him through.
Forbidden.
I mean, he's John Wilkes Booth. Harold, he made it across the same bridge less than an hour later. I mean, he's Harold.
Right.
And he rendezvoused with Booth. After retrieving weapons and supplies previously stored at Surrattsville, Harold and Booth rode to the home of Samuel A. Mudd, who was a local doctor, who then splinted the leg that Booth had broken in his escape, and later made a pair of crutches for Booth.
Yeah.
After one day at Mudd's house, Booth and Harold, they hired a local man to guide them to Samuel Cox's house. Cox, in turn, took them to Thomas Jones, who was a Confederate sympathizer. He hid Booth and Harold in the Zakiah Swamp for 5 days until they could cross the Potomac.
Right.
Afternoon of April 24th, they arrived at the farm of Richard Garrett, who was a tobacco farmer in King George County, Virginia.
Oh.
Booth, he told Garrett he was a wounded Confederate soldier.
April 15th letter to Navy Surgeon General George Brainerd Todd from his brother tells of the rumors in Washington about Booth. "Today, all the city is in mourning, nearly every house being in black, and I have not seen a smile, no business, and a many strong man I have seen in tears. Some reports say Booth is a prisoner. Others say he's made his escape. But from orders received here, I believe he is taken, and during the night will be put on a monitor for safekeeping, as a mob, once raised now, would have no end."
Yeah, they kill him. The hunt for conspirators quickly became the largest in U.S. history, involving thousands of federal troops and countless civilians.
Damn.
Edwin Stanton, he personally directed the operation, authorizing rewards of $50,000, which is about $1 million today
Son of a bitch.
for Booth, and $25,000 each for Harold and John Surratt.
Damn. It was $500,000.
Jeez. Booth and Harold were sleeping at Garrett's farm April 26 when soldiers from the 16th New York Cavalry arrived, surrounded the barn, and threatened to set fire to it. Harold surrendered, but Booth cried out, "I will not be taken alive." The soldiers, they set fire to the barn. Booth scrambled to the back door with a rifle and pistol.
Here we go. Sergeant Boston Corbett crept up behind the barn, shot Booth in the back of the head, about an inch below the spot where Booth shot Lincoln, severing his spinal cord.
Damn.
Booth was carried out onto the steps of the barn. Soldier poured water into his mouth, which he spat out, unable to swallow. Booth told the soldiers, "Tell my mother I died for my country." Unable to move his limbs, he asked a soldier to lift his hands before his face and whispered his last words as he gazed at them. "Useless. Useless." He died on the porch of Garrett Farm 3 hours later. Everybody thought that he got taken at the doctor's office, and he did not. Corbett was initially arrested for disobeying orders from Stanton that Booth be taken alive if possible, but was later released and was largely considered a hero by the media and the public. Of course, they wanted him alive. And then they were going to kill him.
They were going to hang him in public.
Right.
Obviously. Well, without Harold to guide him, Powell did not find his way back to the Surratt house until April 17th.
Damn.
He told detectives waiting there that he was a ditch digger hired by Mary, but she denied knowing him.
Oh, wow.
Both were then arrested. George Adzerat, on the other hand, he hid at his cousin's farm in Germantown, Maryland, which is about 25 miles northwest of Washington. He was arrested there April 20th. The remaining conspirators were arrested by month's end, except for John Surratt, who fled to Quebec, where Roman Catholic priests hid him.
Oh,
jeez.
Makes sense.
What? Well,
September, he boarded a ship to Liverpool, England, staying in the Catholic Church of the Holy Cross there.
what the fudge is going on with these Catholics?
Well, from there, he moved furtively through Europe until joining the Pontifical Zouaves in the Papal States. A friend from his school days recognized him there in early 1866 and alerted the United States government.
Damn.
Surratt
That's a small world.
Right. Surratt was arrested by the papal authorities, but managed to escape under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, Father of Timothy let him out.
Damn right. He was finally captured by an agent of the United States in Egypt in November of 1866.
Scores of persons were arrested, including many associates of the conspirators, and anyone had even the slightest contact with Booth or Harold during their flight. Those included Louis Weichman, a boarder in Mrs. Surratt's house, Booth's brother Junius, in Cincinnati at the time, when Lincoln was assassinated, theater owner John Ford, James Pumphrey, from whom Booth hired his horse, John Lloyd, the innkeeper who rented Miss Surratt's Maryland Tavern, and gave Booth and Harold weapons and supplies the night of the 14th.
Ooh.
Plus Samuel Cox and Thomas Jones, who helped Booth and Harold cross the Potomac. All were eventually released except Samuel Arnold, George Adzerat, David Harold, Samuel Mudd, Michael O'Laughlin, Lewis Powell, Edmund Spangler. He was a theater stagehand who had given Booth's horse to the Burroughs to hold.
Bam.
And Mary Surratt.
Wow. The accused were tried by a military tribunal ordered by Johnson, who had succeeded to the presidency on Lincoln's death. Major General David Hunter, he was presiding. Major General Lew Wallace. Brigadier General Robert Sanford Forrest. Brigadier General Robert Sanford Foster. Brevet Major General Thomas Maley Harris. Brigadier General L.B. and Howe. Brigadier General August Caultz. Colonel James Eakin. Colonel Charles Tompkins. Lieutenant Colonel David Ramsey Clenenden. They all were there.
Prosecution was led by U.S. Army Judge Advocate General Joseph Holt, assisted by Congressman John A. Bingham and Major Henry Lawrence Burnett. Lew Wallace was the only lawyer on the tribunal. The use of a military tribunal provoked criticism from the former Attorney General Edward Bates and the Secretary of Navy Gideon Welles,
Damn right.
who believed that a civil court should have presided. No. But Attorney General James Speed pointed to the military nature of the conspiracy and the facts that the defendants acted as enemy combatants,
right,
and that martial law was in force at the time in the District of Columbia.
Damn right.
In 1866, in Ex parte Milligan, the United States Supreme Court banned the use of military tribunals in places where civil courts were operational.
No.
So we can't have this again.
Yeah. Only a simple majority of the tribunal members was required for a guilty verdict, a 2/3 for a death sentence. There was no route for appeal other than to President Johnson.
And that shit ain't happening.
7 week
like, you guys tried to kill me, dude.
Right. 7-week trial included testimony of 366 witnesses.
Don't know why it took 7 weeks.
All of the defendants were found guilty on June 30th. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, George Adzerat were sentenced to death by hanging. Samuel Mudd, Samuel Arnold, Michael O'Laughlin were sentenced to life in prison.
Why'd Adzerat get sentenced to death by hanging and even do anything?
That's crazy.
Just got drunk.
Edmund Spangler sentenced 6 years. After sentencing Mary Surratt to hang, 5 members of the tribunal signed a letter recommending clemency for her. But Johnson did not stop the execution. He later claimed he never saw the letter.
Yeah, right.
Mary Surratt, Powell, Harold, Adzerat hanged at the Old Arsenal Penitentiary. Mary Surratt was the first woman executed by the United States government ever. O'Laughlin died in prison in 1867. Mudd, Arnold, Spangler were pardoned in February of 1869 by Johnson.
And it's like baited on whether Mudd knew what was going on or not.
Right. He's like, dude, Mudd's like, man, I'm just treating a broken leg, which was not even mentioned in the whole story there.
Yes, it did. So he provided him a cast and made crutches for him.
Oh, didn't hear that.
Oh. Spangler, who died in 1875, always insisted his sole connection to the plot was that Booth asked him to hold his horse.
All right.
John Surratt stood trial in a civil court in Washington in 1867. 4 residents of Elmira, New York, claimed they had seen him there between April 13th and 15th. 15 others testified they either saw him or someone who resembled him in Washington on the same day of the assassination.
Wow.
The jury could not reach a verdict, and John Surratt was released.
I mean, what are you going to do, right? Lincoln's redefinition of Republican values has been stressed by historians such as John Patrick Diggins, Harry V. Jaffa, Vernon Burton, Eric Foner, and Herman J. Bells. Lincoln called the Declaration of Independence, which emphasized freedom and equality for all, the sheet anchor of republicanism beginning in the 1850s. He did this at the time when the Constitution, which tolerated slavery, was the focus of most political discourse. Dickens notes, Lincoln presented Americans a theory of history that offers a profound contribution to the theory and destiny of republicanism itself. He did that in 1860 Cooper Union speech. Instead of focusing on the legality of an argument, he focused on the moral base of republicanism.
His position on the war, oh, by the way, guys, we're in his legacy as a president right now. His position on war was founded on a legal argument regarding the Constitution as essentially a contract among the states and all parties must agree to pull out of the contract.
Right.
Furthermore, it was a national duty to ensure the Republic stands in every state. Many soldiers and religious leaders from the North, though, they felt the fight for liberty and freedom of slaves was ordained by their moral and religious beliefs.
Right. As a Whig activist, Lincoln was a spokesman for business interests, favoring high tariffs, banks, infrastructure improvements, and railroads, in opposition to the Jacksonian Democrats. Lincoln, he shared the sympathies that the Jacksonians professed for the common man, but he disagreed with the Jacksonian view that the government should be divorced from economic enterprise. Well, nevertheless, Lincoln admired Andrew Jackson's steeliness as well as his patriotism.
Andrew Jackson was a bad man.
He was a bad hombre.
According to historian Sean Willentz, just as the Republican Party of the 1850s absorbed certain elements of Jacksonianism, so Lincoln, whose Whiggery had always been more egalitarian than that of the other Whigs, he found himself absorbing some of them as well.
What are you going to do?
Some of the Jacksonian spirit resided inside the Lincoln White House.
Damn right it did.
William C. Harris, he found that Lincoln's reverence for the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, the laws under it, and the preservation of the Republic and its institutions strengthened his conservatism.
I mean, it should. James G. Randall emphasizes his tolerance and moderation in his preference for orderly progress, his distrust of dangerous agitation, and his reluctance towards ill-digested schemes of reform. Randall concludes that he was a conservative in his complete avoidance of that type of so-called radicalism, which involved abuse of the South, hatred for the slaveholder, thirst for vengeance, partisan plotting, and ungenerous demands that the Southern institutions be transformed overnight by outsiders.
In Lincoln's first inaugural address, he explored the nature of democracy. He denounced secession as anarchy, and he explained that the majority rule had to be balanced by constitutional restraint. He said, a majority held in restraint by constitutional checks and limitations,
yes,
and always changing easily with deliberate changes of popular opinions and sentiments, is the only true sovereign of a free people.
Very true, man. I mean, the Founding Fathers said it best.
The successful reunification of the states had consequences for how people viewed the country. The term the United States has historically been used sometimes in the plural, as these United States, and other times in the singular. Civil War was a significant force in the eventual dominance of the singular usage by the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
We are one, baby.
Right. Union. In surveys of U.S. scholars ranking presidents conducted since 1948, top 3 presidents are generally Abe, George, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I don't know why Roosevelt's constantly ranked so high, to be honest with you, but
He was president for 35 years.
oh, exactly my point.
Although the order varies, but it's usually Lincoln and Washington. Actually, I would have to put Washington number 1.
Well, the next two you're about to say are generally top 5 in some order.
Right. Between 1999 and 2011, Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan were the top-ranked presidents in 8 public opinion surveys. And I don't even know why JFK was a great president. What did he do?
He got some
A couple of things.
stuff done.
Right.
He's the one that ignited the space shit.
Yeah, he wanted to end the Federal Reserve, just didn't get a chance.
Well, they ended him.
All right. 2004 study found that scholars in the fields of history and politics ranked Lincoln number 1, while legal scholars placed him second after George Washington. I mean, George Washington has to be number 1. I'm sorry, guys.
All right, Lincoln's assassination left him a national martyr, of course. He was viewed by abolitionists as a champion of human liberty.
Okay.
Republicans linked Lincoln's name to their party. Many, though not all, in the
Party of
South
Lincoln.
considered Lincoln as a man of outstanding ability.
They did.
Historians have said he was a classical liberal in
Yep.
the 19th century sense. Historian Alan Guelzo, he states that Lincoln was a classical liberal Democrat, an enemy of artificial hierarchy, a friend to trade and business as ennobling and enabling, and an American counterpart to Mill, Cobden, and Bright,
Okay.
whose portrait Lincoln hung in his White House office.
Sociologist Barry Schwartz argues that Lincoln's American reputation grew slowly from the late 19th century until the Progressive Era, which is 1900s to 1920s. He emerged as one of America's most venerated heroes, even among white Southerners. The high point came in 1922 with the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Union nationalism, as envisioned by Lincoln, helped lead America to be the nationalism of Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Roosevelt. In the New Deal era, liberals honored Lincoln not so much as a self-made man or the Great War president, but they honored him as the advocate of the common man, who they claimed would have supported the welfare state, which I don't think he would have.
I think he would have.
I don't know about that.
Well, Shorts, the guy, he argues that in 1930s and 40s, the memory of Abraham Lincoln was practically sacred and provided the nation with a moral symbol inspiring and guiding American life.
Right.
During the Great Depression, he argues, Lincoln served as a means for seeing the world's disappointments, for making its sufferings not so much explicable as meaningful. FDR, preparing for war, he used the words of the Civil War president to clarify the threat posed by Germany and Japan. Americans asked, what would Lincoln do?
WWLD, baby. However, Schwartz also finds that since World War II, Lincoln's symbolic power has lost relevance, and this fading hero is symptomatic of fading confidence in national greatness. He went on to suggest that postmodernism and multiculturalism have diluted greatness as a concept. Well, fucking racist.
Right.
In the Cold War years, Lincoln's image shifted to a symbol of freedom, who brought hope to those oppressed by communist regimes. He had long been known as the great emancipator, but by the late 60s, some African-American intellectuals, led by Lerone Bennett Jr., denied that Lincoln even deserved that title.
Well, he got attention. He got wide attention when he called Lincoln a white supremacist in 1968. Anything to get your race narrative out there. He noted Lincoln used ethnic slurs and told jokes that ridiculed blacks. Sure he did.
I'm sure that they all did.
Bennett argued that Lincoln opposed social equality and proposed that freed slaves voluntarily move to another country. He did. Remember, they did have a place moved. Then they were
in Mexico.
No, it was South America.
Right.
They were gonna literally take over this country for them. Yeah, but,
Which is true.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? The emphasis shifted. You know that's why. What is it in Africa? It's Liberia or Liberia,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Liberia. That was created by America for freed slaves and shit. Project American Colonization. Yeah, they wanted to go black people to go back better freedom and prosperity in Africa than in the United States. Yeah, okay.
Bring back, huh?
Okay. The emphasis shifted away from Lincoln, the emancipator, to an argument that blacks had freed themselves from slavery, or at least were responsible for pressuring the government to emancipate them.
I don't think either one of those.
No.
Defenders of Lincoln retorted that he was a moral visionary who deftly advanced the abolitionist cause as fast as politically possible. He did do it fast as politically possible.
We do know, though, that he didn't want to be known as an abolitionist.
Not at all.
Until it suited him, actually.
Right. Brian Dirk stated that few Civil War scholars take Bennett or Thomas DiLorenzo seriously, pointing to their narrow political agendas and faulty research. By the 1970s, Lincoln had become a hero again to the political conservatives. Apart from neo-Confederates such as Mel Bradford, who denounced his treatment of the white South for his intense nationalism, his support for business, his insistence on stopping the spread of slavery, his acting on Lockean and Burkean principles on behalf of both liberty and tradition, and his devotion to the principles of the Founding Fathers.
Well, Lincoln became a favorite of liberal intellectuals across the world. Barry Schwartz wrote in 2009 that Lincoln's image suffered erosion, fade in prestige, benign ridicule in the late 20th century. By contrast, David Herbert Donald opined in his 1996 biography that Lincoln was distinctly endowed with the personality trait of negative capability, defined by the poet John Keats and attributed to extraordinary leaders who were capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason.
Okay. Whatever. 21st century saw that President Barack Obama named Lincoln as his favorite president of all time. And he insisted on using the Lincoln Bible for his inaugural ceremonies.
Is it a real Lincoln Bible that Lincoln had? Yeah. Oh, really?
Lincoln has often been portrayed by Hollywood, almost always in a flattering light. Lincoln has also been admired by political figures outside the U.S., including German political theorist Karl Marx,
Theorist?
Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi, former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Liberian, yes.
Yeah. What did I say?
Liberian.
Leader of the Italian or Risorgimento, Giuseppe Garibaldi. It's crazy. Lincoln's portrait appears on two denominations of United States currency, the penny and the $5 bill. He appears on postage stamps across the whole world.
Oh.
While he usually portrayed bearded, he did not even grow a beard until 1860 at the suggestion of 11-year-old Grace Bettel. He was the first of 5 presidents to do so. He has been memorialized in many towns, many cities, and many counties by his name.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Including the capital of Nebraska.
Yes.
Lincoln, Nebraska. The United States Navy Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln is named after Lincoln, obviously. The second Navy ship to bear his name.
They just announced a USS Bill Clinton and a USS George W. Bush.
Really?
Yeah. The Lincoln Memorial is one of the most visited monuments in the nation's capital, of course. It is one of the most visited National Park Service sites in the country.
Oh.
Ford's Theater, among the most visited sites in Washington, D.C., is across the street from the Peterson House, where Lincoln died.
Yep.
Memorials in Springfield, Illinois include the Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum.
Is the Lincoln House, the Peterson House exactly the way it looked?
Yeah.
Nice.
Lincoln's home, which there's a nice little thing on YouTube of a guy exploring it. Pretty good. There was a outhouse back then.
Right.
Lincoln, there was one for his son, his wife. The same outhouse, but like a hole.
Right.
And his was like super tall. You could barely get on it because he's so tall. Obviously.
Right.
And obviously his tomb in Illinois is most visited as well.
Fantastic.
A portrait carving of Lincoln appears with those of 3 other presidents on Mount Rushmore. Yes.
An influential statue of Lincoln stands in Lincoln Park, in Chicago.
It starts with one.
With recastings given as diplomatic gifts to the Parliament Square in London, the Parque Lincoln in Mexico City.
Well, cool.
2019, Congress officially dedicated room H226 in the United States Capitol to Abraham Lincoln. The room is located off the National Statuary Hall and served as the post office of the House, while then Representative Abraham Lincoln served in Congress from 1847 to 1849. Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic.
Look at that.
Here we go, guys. That's the end of Lincoln's story. Literally 6 hours probably worth we just did of Lincoln. 5.5. Yeah, cool. Yeah. That's a story, and
we're sticking to it.
We're sticking to it because I don't think it's going to change.
It might.
You never know. Revisionist.
Right.
Yeah, that's it for this series. Kicks off Battles Behind the Battles. Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles.
Got some good shit coming up, too.
Next week, kicking it off on the Confederate side with the other president.
Oh, jeez. This guy's going to have a short story.
Jefferson Davis. It's going to be one episode for sure. But
Right.
Lincoln, maybe Grant. Well, probably the only one that has more than one episode, I would assume.
Robert E. Lee will probably have a decent one.
Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, next president, the other president, Jefferson Davis next, and then we'll probably do Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant after that.
Well,
and then we'll work our way to somebody else.
Well, we'll probably throw in between those like an event or something.
Maybe whatever this one was. Maybe the Trent Affair.
Something like that.
Or the...
That's all kinds of stuff.
Or we can look at the Dahlgren Papers, which was the plan to assassinate Jefferson Davis and a bunch of Confederate guys. So early on in the war. So yeah, either or. Next week's Jefferson Davis. So keep it right here, and we'll be back for that. Subscribe, share with your friends, all that good stuff. See you next week on Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles. We are the Mother Michiganders.
Dang. Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dangs.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
All right, welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, and specifically the first ever Battles of the American Civil War Behind the Battles. I don't know. There was nothing else really to call it.
Something like that.
Biographies, profiles. I don't know. You do what the graphic's going to say behind the battle. So
Sure.
That's what it's going to be. If you guys are new, we just finished up the whole entirety of the Civil War, battle by battle.
And we did not skip one that wasn't recorded as an official battle. I'm sure there's many more that
Well, we did
we could have done.
every battle recognized by the American Battlefield
Right.
Institution or whatever. But 300 and something battles. It took us 2.5 years to finish the podcast. So we did it from the very first to the very last. And now we're kind of behind the battles doing the life profiles of some of the most famous figures.
What led everybody to this point in history?
Basically, yeah.
1861 at Fort Sumter.
Howdy-do, we got to start it off with America's favorite president, Abe Lincoln. There are going to be 4 parts of Abraham Lincoln because